Good morning and welcome once again to Churchill Downs and Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup. I'm Kate Bradar with Joe Christopher. So happy that you could join us once again after a sensational start to the preparations for Breeders' Cup week. Joe, the countdown is on. The weather is starting to cooperate, at least a little bit. We still continue to have some showers, much like yesterday, but the forecast is to clear and get a little better as the week goes on.
Between Winks, the World Series game, and this show, many of you might not have slept, but there's a lot of enjoyment being tied in, including this workout show, which is going to be great once again today with visuals, with the horses training, and also the information that we're going to be able to provide. And yes, some audibles being called, but that's what this game is all about. The forecast the next 3 days looks beautiful.
And in the East Coast as well, trainers calling some audibles, so increased activity yesterday. We're going to try to bring you some of those works as well, and as the week goes on, we'll be able to either eyeball them in the flesh here at Churchill Downs as horses arrive, or we will have video courtesy of all our friends across the country, the New York Racing Association, Keeneland Racecourse, XBTV, all jumping in to help provide you with all the preparations for racing's biggest day on racing's biggest stage. Here's a look at what we hope to see today. Trainers have suggested that they might have their horses out for more serious workouts or breezes. Axelrod for Michael McCarthy along with Vibrance. That's kind of a standby situation. Again, we'll wait and see. Either way, we'll have a look at them on the track. Promises Fulfilled and Seven Trumpets, Dale Romans, Talented Sprinters, and Reflect for Keith DeSormo, Trophy Chaser, as well as Signalman for Kenny McPeak, one of the juveniles set to potentially breeze. And Joe, the difference between the breezes and the gallops, or what we see most of the horses doing out on the track behind us, is significant in terms of the preparation, but it's all standard routine leading up to races and carefully spaced and with the goal in mind of having the best possible circumstances, the best track, getting the best out of their horses.
Yeah, every trainer has a schedule that their horses are on. They have to deviate away from it a little bit at times, which they're not thrilled about. But that's why these trainers are on the biggest stage, because they know their horses very well, and they know what their horses need on a day-to-day basis.
Why they get a little edgy at this time as well, because every detail is so critical and so important, and a little rain can really interfere with the best laid plans. Here's a look at a few horses that we've seen already today. Track opens 5:30, I believe.
Yeah, early.
And with the lights, it almost looks like daylight, so horsemen able to take advantage of a pristine racetrack right after it opens. And Midnight BISOU for the distaff was out with a nice gallop. Steve Asmussen taking over her training for her last few starts. And, Joe, I will say, to me, she looks stronger and better than she did after a really lengthy campaign against some tough horses every step of the way. She moved up via DQ through a hard-fought now victory in the Cotillion in her most recent start.
Yeah, she's tugging here. She definitely wants to do more. We will be, trying to explain exactly how we believe these horses are doing and feeling and training as we see them visually one by one, either via tape or live. And Midnight BISOU has a great resume. She's 5 for 8 this year. She has been dancing most of the 3-year-old dances, including a third in the Kentucky Oaks behind Monomoy Girl. Most recently, as Kate mentioned, a disqualification of Monomoy Girl in the Cotillion puts a Midnight BISOU in the win column once again. And, yeah, she's just been extremely consistent. She does her best work from a little bit off the pace, Kate, and it looks like there will be a little bit of forwardness in the Breeders' Cup distaff this year, and she's coming into the race seemingly the right way.
A little moisture in the track doesn't seem to bother her a bit. She has a nice contact with the rider. You can see the rider's position balanced right over her withers, or in essence her shoulder blades, over her neck, but at the same time she's balanced and moving beautifully there out on the track earlier this morning. A couple other horses that we got to look at, and the one thing that you're looking for beyond how they move over the racetrack, Joe, and expression in general, that they seem to be happy mentally as well as physically. And she certainly seems to be enjoying herself out there.
Yeah, she does. And you mentioned the fact that she looks like she's enjoying the off-track. She does have a win in her only start on an off-track. It came at Santa Anita back in March in the Santa Isabella race, in which she was completely dominant and won that race for fun. So if we do have an off-track, and none of us are hoping for that, it's a good sign for Midnight BISOU.
You're going to see a very different style between exercise riders and between the horses in terms of how they look on the track and the way they travel. Each each horse, much like human athletes, is an individual, and based on their body type and their preferences and the trainer's preferences, as well as the styles of the riders. The goal always to fit the rider to the horse, but that's part of the fun of watching these workouts too, is to see how many different ways there are to get a horse in peak condition.
Yeah, that's the purpose of this show. I mean, we all look at past performances, right? But horses are animals. Horses aren't numbers that you see on a piece of paper. That's how we evaluate them, but an important aspect of evaluating the horses is also how they're coming into the race, and that's what we're here for.
And also how they come out of their races and how they come out of their workouts. And horse that we got a glimpse of today for the first time on Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup, Lone Sailor, just doing a little jog. Now, keep in mind, 2 days ago, Lone Sailor had a very good workout, but per his trainer, Tom Amos, that's how he usually is. You'll hear some buzz about how good he looks out on the track. This happened at Derby time, Joe. Didn't get the circumstances necessary to be at his best in the Derby, but he, after some hard luck trips, was able to emerge the winner in his most recent start. And this is a horse who's maintained his form for a very long and extended period of time. He physically looks sensational. The workout was very good. He likely walked the shed row yesterday, staying at the barn area just to recover from the work. And then that first day back, you can see, is what we call just a light jog to stretch his legs and, again, make sure he's completely recovered from the workout before he does more maintenance work such as a gallop.
Yeah, his coat looks great. Tom Amos said, hey, he lost so many races in a row, just falling short, but the victory in the Oklahoma Derby is what made him believe that he was Breeders' Cup worthy. He was off slowly that day, was hung 7 wide on the turn, kept coming gamely. Did get a fortunate bob on the wire. Racing luck sometimes comes into play, but no Lone Sailor back in the win column in that particular race. You know, is he a 1.25 mile horse? Would he be better over a 1-turn mile in the dirt mile? He is cross-entered in those 2 races. His best distance is probably 9 furlongs. There's no Breeders' Cup race at that distance. Tom's leaning towards the Classic at this time, probably because of the size of the purse.
In your mind, was there one race that might be better suited for him, or that, as it looks like the fields are coming together, that you think he would have the better shot?
I think probably much like Seeking the Soul of the Dirt Mile, because he can just sit and hope for a really fast pace up front and then just try to pass as many horses as he can. I think that 1 turn would come to his advantage in a scenario like that versus the 1.25 mile where it's a stamina kind of grinding type race. Lone Sailor might be able to get a piece of that, but circumstantially I think the dirt mile would suit him better.
Difference of opinion that makes a horse race. I kind of lean toward the Classic for him as well, but we'll wait for Monday when the fields will actually be set and post positions drawn. Meanwhile, we had a breezer as well this morning, and that was Derby Date, tuning up for the juvenile. Wayne Lucas has a habit of crack of dawn. He is one of the first people here on the backstretch, even at 83 years of age, and he is usually one of the first to have horses out on the racetrack, and Derby Date no exception. You can see that the exercise rider actually has a blinking light on his helmet. That's so that everyone else can keep an eye on him very carefully, and also it helps the other riders on the track know that there's a horse breezing. It's a little unusual, and you want to make sure you stay out of their way.
It's kind of like when you're riding your bike first thing in the morning, right? You've got lights on. You want people to be able to see you that are on the road. It's the same with this workout situation with Derby Date. He ran in the Breeders' Futurity last time out. He was 6 wide on the first turn, was moving 3 wide on the turn, kind of made a middle move and flattened out into Nick's Go, who was the long shot winner. Right now, Caton, he's on the outside looking in, hoping for a defection.
And he did switch over to his other lead right after the finish line. We'll talk more about leads and lead changes, what it all means. But otherwise, I really like the fact that he seemed pretty relaxed throughout and was able to kind of maintain a nice cruising speed throughout that entire work. Another member of our broadcast team is bird's eye view of the horses in the barn area, as well as the trainers and horsemen as they get on with all the preparations leading up to this big day. Let's check in for the first time this morning with Gabby GADOT.
Thank you so much, Caton. And we are standing here on the Lucas Gab, a great perspective to try to check out some of these horses as they go out and come back home for their morning training. So excited to be reporting all morning with you guys. But we do have some news to bring all of our viewers up to date on, and it begins with the European shippers. So the European shippers did ship in early this morning at about 1:30, 2 o'clock a.m. And one of the most notable shippers was, of course, Enable, your dual Arc de Triomphe winner. A lot of buzz circulating around this very, very talented filly. Of course, she is pointed and expected to run Indy Turf. Thank you to our Breeders' Cup social media team for providing this coverage and being out there so early in the morning. Of course, some of the other European contenders include Roaring Lion coming out of his QE2 win on British Champions Day at Royal Ascot, and the Connections just recently did confirm that he will be running in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So a lot of exciting stuff. Now, with those European shippers, what generally happens, they have to go through the quarantine process. They did ship into that quarantine barn. What they will do will tack walk for the next couple of days, and they are expected to hit the track on Monday morning. So we'll be looking forward to that. In terms of some of the Irish horses, Ballydoyle horses for Aidan O'Brien, they are expected to ship Monday. So we'll be keeping our eye on that. Now, one horse who did not make the plane ride over here was actually Crystal Ocean, who was expected to run in the Turf. So that was one key defection that we learned of yesterday. And another key defection that we learned of was of Dream Tree, the very talented Bob Baffert filly who was expected to run in the filly and mare sprint. And the reason being, she did come out of her work yesterday with an entrapped epiglottis. Now, what that is an epiglottis is kind of a cartilage fold that is in the esophagus, and sometimes it'll flap back and forth. That's what it's supposed to do. But when it gets stuck in the esophagus, it obviously restricts the airway. So surgery will be required for her. It's kind of a common surgery, though, so not too bad of news, but just really unfortunate that she won't be able to be in the starting gate for the filly and mare sprint. Another thing, Brad Cox, he was supposed to send out a bevy of workers this morning, but due to the track conditions and due to the weather here, he has pushed it back till tomorrow. Now, some of those workers included the likes of Monomoy Girl, Golden Mischief, and Will Call. So for more on that, we actually did get the chance to catch up with Brad Cox to see the reason behind the pushback.
Track was just a little wet when we got tomorrow, so it's no big deal. We're not looking for a whole lot with any of them, so get them on as good a surface as we can. Probably better shot at that happening tomorrow as opposed to this morning.
Do you think that will affect them at all to push the work back by a day?
Not at all, no. I do not.
Well, as you can see, Brad Cox not worried about it whatsoever. A lot of the time, you know, these horses stick to a usual routine going into the Breeders' Cup in terms of a usual work routine. But if you're just pushing it back one day, I don't think it's that big of an issue, and nor does Brad Cox. He just wants a very dry and safe surface for those horses to put in one of their final works on. And Caton, as we all know, but it's important to note that really the most important work for these Breeders' Cup contenders was last weekend. That's when you really start to tighten the screws. This is more so a maintenance work just to make sure that they're going well into the Breeders' Cup weekend. So we'll be looking forward to seeing the bevy of Brad Cox workers tomorrow morning.
Absolutely, Gabby, point on with the idea that, as Chad Summers said, if they haven't gotten them fit and ready by now, they're in serious trouble. The workouts that happen over the course of the next week, however, will become of major importance to all of us handicappers and those watching the races, as they are to all the horsemen too. And fortunately for us, we have clocker Brandon Staubel to join us, who is clocking quite literally all the action on the track. Thanks for dropping down again, as has been the case. And Brandon, a lot of activity. It'll pick up even more over the next few days, but we've got a few workers that we're going to take a good look at. What are you looking for, just generally, though, as we observe these workers?
I'm just looking for the horses to be moving well within themselves, and just the fact that we've got to know some of these horses, whether they're based at Churchill or we get to see them on TV, just to kind of do the same things that they've always done, just moving well down the lane, stretching out well. I really look for a good push from behind. I mean, that's where the power comes from. I want to see that these horses are hitting behind well and just doing it easy, moving well within themselves and coming into the race the best they can. We're
going to start with Seeking the Soul, who was out tuning up yesterday, had an opportunity to see this workout for Dallas Stewart. And I thought it was pretty textbook Dallas Stewart workout.
Yeah, it was. Came over and talked to me afterwards and just told me how much he liked it. Ryder never moved the muscle, and I agree. I mean, it was a very easy move in here. It's a cool horse because, you know, the previous work out of the race, he went in 51 or something like that, and then the next work he's able to go in 47-3. So, you know, the horse is going to be able to relax in a race, whether it's the dirt mile or the classic, and you can see down the lane, Ryder's just got a long, what I call a long rein there. He's moving well to the wire, good push, and kind of a deceiving move in here because he did look like he was going in about 49, and then you look down at the watch and he hits it in 47. Dallas came over right afterwards, and he was very happy with the move, and I agree, it was a great move, and exactly, you know, you hear it all the time, it's exactly what we wanted. It really was what they wanted, and you'll see the rider. Dallas is not much of a guy to really gallop out super strong in there, so it was probably more like a 101 type gallop out there, but this horse is doing well, and I hope he gets in the classic because I know that's where he wants to run, but if he has to go in the dirt mile, he'll go there.
I know Dallas doesn't necessarily put as much emphasis on the gallop out, so the workout for practical purposes stops right after the wire. Gets that maybe from his mentor, D-Wade Lucas.
I think so, yeah. I heard you all talking about Derby date, and that, yeah, kind of the same thing there, just the typical Lucas pull-up right after the wire. You don't want to do too much. I will take notice sometimes. It's a good point because I'll take notice sometimes when a trainer that doesn't really gallop out that strong, you'll see maybe a horse gallop out really big or a double gallop out, then I really take notice on that.
A little bit different style of workout for Thunder Snow. Let's take a look at that one as well. This is the horse that shipped in for the Derby and unfortunately encountered slop and crowd, and for any number of reasons had to pull up basically after he broke out of the starting gate, but has since had some great form. Thunder Snow breezing yesterday at Churchill Downs.
Yeah, Thunder Snow's been here for a while, and you know, I made a comment on social media when he first got here how fit he was. I mean, he looks so fit right now, and you can tell by the way they train. I think this is his second straight mile workout in here, and he just got asked the last quarter to do a little something. So Thunder Snow moves with a lot of high knee action. You'll see it coming down the lane in here. He moves the fronts up pretty high, so not as efficient as you would like to see, but he's long. He's very fit. He's going to have no problem getting the distance. It's going to, you can see right here the rider kind of urging a little bit. They're going to want to finish up. It's a different training style. I think over there they work on a lot of fitness, not so much on sharpening the speed in here. So I think they're trying to ask down the lane. They want this guy to kind of sharpen up a little bit. Thunder Snow does take a while to switch over to the right lead. Sometimes he doesn't. In the previous work he did. I think it's a very late lead change. Yeah, right here from what I remember. And ears are up though at the wire. Just a lot of urging, but it's the way I think they've kind of built this work. It was more of a stamina work. They're going to make sure that they're not going to get beat because of lack of fitness in here. I think Thunder Snow, you know, it's really interesting. I chose these workouts because the interesting styles, the way that they're training Thunder Snow, a lot of fitness, a lot of stamina versus a guy like Dallas Stewart, who is easy work out of the race and then sharpening the speed with the 47. I would expect Dallas to come back with another pretty major moves right before the race. And then, you know, Chad Summers, too, the way he's doing things. 3 different styles there, and I just like it's interesting to see the way that everybody does it.
And another way of doing it, preparing on the turf, we saw with 40 shares yesterday, and kind of a nice opportunity for us to get to, 40 under, and it's a nice opportunity to get to see the turf course as well, and how it handles the rain that's coming.
Yeah, it's going to be a little different from Del Mar, where we had a quicker turf. We've got rain, and we've more rain on the way, so there's going to be some give in the ground in here. Given the ground today, I just really like this move a lot. When you watch him coming down the lane, really getting over the ground well, it was almost like he was floating over it, and it just catches the eye in here. 40 under going in the juvenile turf. Ryder doesn't really urge much, and big fan of the ears in this work. You're going to see the ears go back and forth, especially after the wire, saying that the horse has a lot more, and he just kind of, you know, gets him switched over right there, and then the horse just kind of took off just super easy down the lane, and you can see he's really extending well down the lane, and I like this move a lot. You can see the ears are flopping back and forth in here. A little bit of nudging maybe just to pick it up, and he really quickened late, and like I said, it was almost like he was just kind of floating over the turf, really got over it well. A little bit of nudging late here to gallop out, but you can see the reach up front. That's one thing I was talking about the other day, and then just a good switch back over, good gallop out in here. Really like this move a lot. Just a personal angle for me, and probably a lot of other people feel this way as well. But when you have a little bit of give in the ground, it seems like the nimble, kind of lighter turf horses do better because those bigger turf horses tend to sink in the ground a little bit. So that's going to be something too when we start looking at horses in the paddock or getting to know them once more horses get on track. I'm going to probably just to slightly maybe look towards those more nimble turf horses versus the big horses, especially if it rains on Breeders' Cup Day.
40 under broke his maiden on a firm turf at Saratoga, but there was a lot of giving the ground when he won at Belmont and the Pilgrim, and we just saw right there that he can handle a turf course with giving the ground. Obviously, with the way the weather has been, with the way the weather might be moving into a Breeders' Cup weekend, there's going to be some giving the ground, which is much different than the Del Mar turf course, like you said, that we saw last year, which would help a horse like this.
I totally agree, and it'd be interesting to see. I believe we're going to have another set of turf works later on in the week, so I think tomorrow, actually. So, maybe we'll get a chance to see a few others. I know the Wesley Ward runner looked good yesterday, too. Chelsea Cloisters, I believe, looked good. I watched that breeze, and it'll be interesting to see. But like I said, I really think it's just a personal angle. If you are watching the horses on the screen, you can kind of tell, or in the paddock when we're talking, the bigger horses, I think they're going to sink into the ground a little bit and maybe not be as quick. A lot of the Euros coming over, they're going to be, I remember seeing Golden Horn at Keeneland. I mean, just those nimble, just really lanky, but really lean and strong, powerful European runners are going to have an advantage, I think.
Brandon, we so appreciate you taking time out of what I know is a very busy time for you, and you get your exercise as well, going up and down to the top of the clubhouse.
You have a little secret, too. I got a little ride to get over here and back, so make sure I don't miss anything.
Take advantage of it. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks so much. And Gabby GADOT on the backside has tracked down a very special guest.
Yes, here with publicity manager Kevin Kirstein, and you have been running around over on the backside, I think, all hours of the day into the wee hours of the morning, including here for the arrival of the Euros last night. What could you tell us about the arrival, and how did they look getting off the van?
I'll tell you what, I don't know if it's really running around, Gabby. Maybe it's walking briskly in the cold, but yeah, it was interesting. The Europeans, there's 22 of the part of the European contingent that shipped in last night. They arrived in Louisville right after 10 o'clock last night, ended up having a little bit of a delay at the airport, then got here right around 1:30 a.m. Eastern time. Enable was on the flight, Roaring Lion was on the flight. It was really cool to see them get off the plane. What these horses are going to have to do now, they're quarantined for 42 hours in barn 48 here at Churchill Downs, and then once they pass the quarantine required by the USDA, they may be allowed to train on Monday morning at the earliest. So it's really exciting to see both of those horses, plus 20 of their other friends, get off the van last night.
Yeah, we'll be really excited to see them hit the track finally on Monday. But there has been news happening almost every day, of course, naturally leading into Breeders' Cup weekend. Tell us about yesterday and some of the noteworthy things, including Thunder Snow, who you were actually here to watch the work.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Thunder Snow continues to impress a lot of people that I've seen on social media, and he's impressed me a little bit too. This is a horse who I think wants to get a mile and a quarter. He breezed yesterday in 7 furlongs in 1:27, and they do a little bit of things differently in Europe, I think, with their breezes. So I was talking to the head assistant, Tommy Burns, who's been here, so we've been talking a little bit about things, and he's just been smiling, happy. He's really liking the way the Thundersnow's been going, and this horse really started out well late down the lane. He switched leads a little bit late in the stretch, but this is a horse who did really well yesterday. It was exciting to see both he and Mind Your Biscuits and hopefully Seeking the Soul, 3 classic contenders, that breezed yesterday. And this weather may not be good for this morning's breezes, Gabby.
Well, you mentioned that we already reported that Brad Cox is pushing back some of his workers to tomorrow. So what can we expect with today and even tomorrow? Mother Nature is not really cooperating with us, but track still seems to be holding up pretty well.
Yeah, it seems okay. It's sealed again for this break. We'll have to see what happens for the next break, if it ends up getting harrowed or not for the 9 o'clock break. I'll have to talk to Dale Romans. He had planned to work both Promises Fulfilled and 7 Trumpets this morning at 9 o'clock, so we'll have to see what he ends up doing with that when he takes a look at the track condition. But Mike McCarthy also possible to breeze Axelrod and Vibrance at 9 o'clock if this track gets a little bit drier. Right after this break, you're going to see Reflect for Keith DeSormo and Signalman for Kenny McPeak that'll be breezing as well. So, these works are, it's Mother Nature's game, and the trainers are throwing some audibles on us, but we'll figure them all out, and I'm confident all you guys back in the truck will get all the works for us.
So I know the Euros arrived at 1:32 a.m. You were here probably at 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m. So my question is, when do you actually sleep?
I don't. I got to sleep an hour and a half on the couch last night because my wife decided to lock the bedroom from the inside out. So I didn't get to sleep in my bed last night, which is fine. Whatever. Maybe I'll get a nap today.
Great stuff, KK. Thank you so much. And as we know, Caton, he is just a valuable source of information, going back to the barns every morning and giving us the information that we need to do our jobs well.
A true all-star and valuable member of our team. We've adopted him on the Breeders' Cup breakfast team and the Players Show as well. In fact, it takes a village on this show, and we should point out that the Breeders' Cup social media team has been instrumental in helping us, as we mentioned, New York Racing Association and Keeneland, as well as XBTV, all helping to provide information, sights, sounds, video, the workouts, and so much more. Many thanks to all of them.
Yeah, a lot of hard-working people on every end of this, bringing you the show, and we appreciate everybody. So many Breeders' Cup races and horses and trainers and people involved to cover, including the Twin Spires Sprint. Kate, and we heard earlier from Kevin Kirstein and Gabby about promises fulfilled and 7 trumpets scheduled to work today. 7 trumpets for the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, and the promises fulfilled for the Twin Spires Sprint. And we do know one thing. He's going to be out there winging it on the front end.
Well, we did get a chance, too, to catch up with the trainer of those two, Dale Romans.
I think Sprint's the most competitive race in the card, and it's a race where something goes wrong, you can't recover. The best horse doesn't always win those little short races. But with that, all that, like you said, with that being said, the winner of this race is going to be Sprint champion. The way it's all, the cards have been dealt. There's 3 or 4 of them in there that are very deserving, and so that's going to be the final decision. If we end up in the Sprint, it's because we think we can win, and then we think we can be champion sprinter.
So an interesting wrinkle, I think, to the Breeders' Cup this year that has added some intrigue and some decisions for trainers and connections of the horses is the presence of the Breeders' Cup Sprint, the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, and the Breeders' Cup Classic. Never before, Joe, have I known of so many trainers that were torn between the 3 races versus usually sprinters go either 6 furlongs or they're ending up in the mile. A lot of the trainers of horses that can go a classic distance, like the 1.25 miles, the classic, also consider the mile as an alternate, kind of a viable option. But you don't often see where you have all 3 in the mix and in play, and that's kind of the case for several horsemen.
Yeah, Mind Your Biscuits is a special horse and a rare horse, obviously, considering all 3 of those races that you mentioned. But I think one of the wrinkles, Caton, is the fact that it's a 1-turn mile here at Churchill. So a lot of those sprinters are maybe willing to stretch out to the 1-turn mile if it suits them equally well, or the competition seems to be a little bit easier as you take a look here at the Dirt Mile. All about Catalina Cruiser. This horse is a perfect 4 for 4. John Sadler has Accelerate in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Therefore, Catalina Cruiser will go here. He is hoping that maybe Catalina Cruiser can be his classic horse next year.
So much as Dale Romans had some options, Wayne Lucas had some options, or has some options as well, with both Bravazzo and this horse you're looking at. That's Warriors Club. Warriors Club, he of the many, many owners who have joined the club to get to experience the thrill of horse ownership, could never have dreamed that they might see their horse one day in the Breeders' Cup. Pretty amazing. Wayne has stated that he wishes there were a 7 furlong race that they could add to the mix because really the sprint is a little too short, and the Dirt Mile, which is likely where I think we will see Warriors Club, is a little too far. But that said, it doesn't matter the distance. It's where they already have gotten for Warriors Club's partners, because to just be able to say you had a horse in the Breeders' Cup and to enjoy that experience has got to be immeasurable.
Yeah, as a horse owner, we want to get our horse to the track. We want to get a first published work. We want to get in a horse race. We want to win. All those things are major achievements, but to get a horse into the Breeders' Cup is just completely next level. Congratulations to the Churchill Downs Racing Club, D. Wayne Lucas, Gary Palmisano, etc. Warriors Club has been just that, a warrior for the club in his couple of years racing. Was a stakes winner at age 2 and has continued to improve.
He's earned over $700,000. I mean, you're lucky if you win a race when you get into this game. So to have a horse that's done what he's done, you can see on the track too. This was this morning. He did have a workout a few days ago. He's relaxed, and that is also an important key component to all this. You really don't want to have your horse so revved up every single day that they go out there that by the time they have to call on the reserve energy, it's not there. This is a horse that's relaxed. He seems to know what he's supposed to do. has kind of a lower head carriage than some of the other horses that we've seen trained so far. But as long as he is continuing to do what he's always done and comes out of his works in good shape and goes about his business, Wayne Lucas has got to be pretty happy.
Yeah, he's at home. He's relaxed. He's here. He's familiar with his surroundings. That's a big deal. Obviously, acclimation is important, particularly for all of these horses that have gotten here early. I think it could be an advantage depending on horse by horse and a case by case basis. But D. Wayne Lucas knows how to win Breeders' Cup races. He's got 20 of them on his resume.
More than any other trainer, for that matter. Hall of Famer also has Bravazzo, as we mentioned, much like Warriors Club is cross-entered in 2 different races. He's in the Breeders' Cup Classic as well as the Mile. The indication from Wayne is that he would lean toward the Classic. Either way, Bravazzo in a little tough, but he's come up with some big races in his own right, and he's another war horse, to be sure, as he just goes out there every single day and does what he's supposed to do. Unlike a stablemate, you can see this is a jog as opposed to a gallop, and he's most likely jogging what we say the wrong way, which is clockwise on the racetrack. There is a set pattern of action for all the horsemen and the horses so that you can direct traffic on a busy racetrack surface. The slower you go, the more toward the outside. When you're warming up or jogging, you tend to go the wrong way or back up or clockwise. When you turn around and do something more serious, a la a gallop or a breeze, you're going to go the right way or counterclockwise, the same way they run in this country. Not to be confused with Europe and overseas in many places where they run the other way.
Like the horse emoji, going the wrong way.
Exactly. Let's take a look at Catalina Cruiser. This tuning up for the Dirt Mile happened on October 21st at Santa Anita, and XBTV providing this video. 7 furlongs, yeah. So you can see that they don't have the lights over at Santa Anita the way that we do at Churchill Downs, and the importance of the lights on the helmet become that much more significant. This enables the clockers to actually get reading on time, because you can see the poles a little bit more clearly than you can see the actual horse out on the track. Maybe through the stretch we'll get a little better look of how he's actually hitting the ground, but you do at least know how consistent he's traveling or speed, and you can also tell by the lights on the helmet how steady the horse is, if he's kind of bobbling up and down or if he's just cruising, and I thought the rider looks pretty motionless.
Yeah, I mean, this is a nice horse. We talked about it earlier. John Sadler has Accelerate in the Breeders' Cup Classic, and he's talked about the fact that Catalina Cruiser is on the path to the Dirt Mile for months now. He's hoping Catalina Cruiser grabs the torch from Accelerate moving into next year and becomes his Breeders' Cup Classic horse. It's hard to believe John Sadler's 0 for 42 in the Breeders' Cup. He's got 2 very live shots this year. Obviously, horses that will go favored in the respective races. Catalina Cruiser has never lost, and not only has he never lost, Caton, in the vast majority of those wins, 4 of them, he's never really had to take a deep breath.
It's been pretty true to his name, too. Just cruises around there.
Yep.
Really fun to watch those horses in California. It'll be even more fun to watch them in the flesh when they get here. In the meantime, horses are coming out onto the track now after the first of 2 breaks for harrowing and renovation. So another pristine surface for the horses to come out on, and among them, Wonder GADOT is out on the track for Mark Cassie, one of the contenders in the distaff. We saw this filly Breeze a couple days ago and took a closer look at that Breeze yesterday. It was sharp. She was very keen to the pole. That is said to be the way she is, high energy, and a real throwback to the old-fashioned type of horse who loved to train and who thrived on racing. She's arguably had a long campaign, but she comes back and she runs even better each time. She beat the boys in the Queen's Plate, and right now what she's doing really is maintenance. I'm sure the connections are just wanting to harness all that energy, keep her calm and controlled, hence she goes with the lead pony next to her as a companion to keep her under control.
This is a perfect example of why we do the show. If you look at her past performances, you're thinking based on the well-beaten 10th in the Travers and the distant 3rd in the Cotillion that she's got to be over the top. Kate mentioned it. It's been a long campaign, but this is why we do the show, so we could show you these horses in the flesh. She couldn't be feeling any better. She's like a bucking bronco out there, and you know, if she reverts back to the top form that she showed earlier in the year, if you're a Wonder GADOT fan, you got to be happy with the way she's coming into this versus the way she's running her last 2 starts.
Now, you see the rider, he has very distinctive footwear. One of the few exercise riders I know that actually wears their moccasins and rather than boots. And I think he's the only one out there that has them, but has worked for Mark for quite a while and is a skilled reinsman. Gets a lot of the tougher horses, too, and she can be a handful, as you can see. You mentioned how she was kind of crow hopping or trying to buck. He's trying to keep her from leaping off the ground. Let's just keep this on the ground, all 4 feet. She is looking around. That's because she's going slower than she would like to go, and it gives her more time to take everything in. That's also why she's not traveling in a straight line. If he were to try to allow her to go straight, if he were to give her any length of rein right now, I think she'd be gone.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we saw the workout the other day when they broke out from the pole. I mean, talk about leaping in the air. That's exactly what she did. And you mentioned it, Kate, and she was really sharp in the work. We talked to Brandon Staubel about it, too. And you and I have had this discussion. To me, with how sharp she is, and she does have a little bit of natural speed anyway, you would think that she's going to show that kind of early foot in the race as well. We'll have to see what happens in the next several days moving forward, but she couldn't be any sharper than she is right now.
No, and it's fun to watch this gallop as it progresses because you saw her kind of going around in different sections of the racetrack and not going straight and cocking her head to the side. But as she goes at a certain point into the exercise rider will try to very subtly give her a signal that it's okay. I like what you're doing. Just settle into kind of a nice rhythm and let her gallop on just a little bit more, which she has already, and that'll enable her to straighten up just a little bit. And you can see when that does happen, she gets to stride out just a little bit more, and you can see that she's traveling evenly and she's traveling well over the ground and that she's coming out of her work in good fashion. She's still controlled. She's still not going as fast as she'd like to go,
right,
but she has settled into a bit of a more comfortable rhythm for both the rider as well as the horse. Now, if another horse goes by her, that could strike another chord and you might see her rev up again, but in the meantime, with no other horses in sight, she'll settle and relax just a little bit. And speaking of horses who can respond to horses around, the Monomoy girl, remember she was supposed to breeze today, and horses are pretty smart but pick up on patterns as well. She may well know that she was this was a day that she was probably going to do more, and often can give an exercise rider a little bit harder time as a result of pushing that work back a day. But she's a pretty professional horse in the mornings. Most of her antics have taken place in the afternoons, where she tends to lose interest and get very competitive and even herd other horses on the track.
She's run several picture-perfect races where she's either made the lead or she's been just off the pace and has done everything professionally. If we look back to the Rachel Alexandra at the fairgrounds back in February, she broke out at the start. She lost about 4 lengths. She was tugging at the back. She blitzed him 3 wide, and she still won, showing a new dimension. And then we all saw what happened in the cotillion last time. Kate, and the rail was a terrible place to be that day. Most of the horses that were competitive, even early in the races, were in the 3 and 4 path. She got pinned on the rail by a long shot. She finally got past the long shot. She made the lead. She drifted all over the racetrack, kind of playing interference against Midnight BISOU, who wound up being awarded the victory in the cotillion. But man, when she's right and things go her way and she's forwardly placed and she can settle into a nice stride, she's super tough to beat.
She's not a big horse, and she has a little bit shorter neck and a little shorter front quarters, and as a result, you can see she travels with her head up just a little bit higher than some of the other horses you see, but she's comfortable doing that. That is how she trains every day. She is wanting to do a bit more as well. You can see by the ears and also just the length of rein. The rider's had to shorten up quite a bit and has a very short hold of her with his feet toward her shoulders or in the dashboard, really trying to harness that energy. She will do what you want her to do, but not necessarily happy about it.
Yeah, she breezed October 20th in 1 minute and 1/5 over a good track here at Churchill. And you heard Brad Cox earlier say that, you know, even though she was supposed to work today, we're not concerned about having to push it back to tomorrow. Probably didn't have to push it back, but preferred to push it back because the move tomorrow is just going to be a maintenance move. It's probably going to be a very, very comfortable half mile, and we've got a worker here for the juvenile, Kate.
Now, this is Signalman, and he has a workmate who I assume is in front of him, not a Breeders' Cup horse. Maybe we'll find out who it is later on. The trainers will actually pair horses very specific reasons as to who they choose as workmates. They may want a horse who's quick, that can offer a target. They may want a horse who is more amenable to staying in company head and head to offer competition all the way to the wire. They may want a horse that's more experienced or more proven than the horse that he's working against to really toughen them up and see where they're at. So we'll know more about the workmate, and that will tell us more about the work. But in the meantime, Signalman is as relaxed as you could ever want to see a 2-year-old to be. This is a very mature, moving type horse. He has a nice stride, reaches out around the turn, didn't get overly keen, but at the same time went right on by his workmate, which is pretty much what you want to see, and is galloping out beautifully here with his ears perked as if he really wants to go around again.
Unlike Monomoy Girl, who has had, you know, double-digit starts, Signalman has only run 3 times. Similar, though, to what Brad Cox said earlier about Monomoy Girl, this is just a maintenance work for Signalman, who did his heavy lifting, 5 furlongs at Keeneland on October 20th, a minute and 1/5. This was a very easy work, well within himself, still looked good doing it. A horse that is progressive. He has run faster times as far as speed figures go in each of his 3 career starts, and was second in the Breeders' Futurity last time out behind Nick's Go. He's going to have to step it up to run with the upper echelon of horses in the juvenile. It's a very tough edition of the race, but he certainly is headed in the right direction.
Now the pull-up is always the hard part when a horse is that happy out there doing what they're doing. You know, the exercise rider was able to give a nice big loop in the reins to a young horse, and that's really telling, Joe, because a young horse is prone to overreact to circumstances or maybe take off or take a look at things, especially with the lights and the mud and the sound of the hooves behind him. The fact that that rider trusted the horse enough to put that big loop in the reins and the slack given tells you a lot about how mature Signalman really is.
Yeah, speaking of maturity, here's a horse that is really matured over the course of his 3-year-old season, to the point, Kate, where Catholic Boy is going to be one of the favorites in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
And I want to give props to the exercise rider, Catholic Boy. I believe her name is Tracy. She has been with him throughout his campaign, and he requires a lot of finesse. He requires a very strong rider, but also a very good rider. And as he's developed, you have to credit the exercise rider as much as the trainer and the rest of the people surrounding him for the progression that you've seen for this sensational horse. He's so versatile. He's been successful on the turf at the highest level as well as the dirt. And if you think about the horses that were initially prepping for the Triple Crown races and the toll that can sometimes take on them, and the fact that this horse who had a setback in the Florida Derby was able to regroup and come back even stronger at the end of the year, it's a pretty remarkable accomplishment for the entire team as well as a testament to the horse. But when he gallops, Joe, you really take a look at him because he's a beautiful animal, but he does pull. He takes a good strong hold, and he has a lot of additional and interesting equipment as well as the way the rider has to ride him.
Yeah, just real quickly on Catholic Boy, because we're going to go to reflex work momentarily. Maybe that setback was a blessing in disguise. You don't think about that at the time, but it allowed him to have a little bit of time to kind of just kick back, grow up, relax, reassert himself, which is exactly what he's done.
Juvenile filly Reflect about a minute ago had a nice breeze over the track. We'll take a look at it here. She comes around the turn. This little smaller bodied horse, but she's funky. She is on the correct lead. That's the right leg extending, right front leg extending or leading through the straightaway. Rider has a nice hold of her, and it looks like the rider doesn't want to ask for much here, just wants to keep her opening up her lungs and running on, stretching her legs a little bit. I would imagine that this isn't a particularly quick work, but I would also imagine that's by design. So you didn't see the rider really asking for any more, and she did finish up. Then the rider kind of pushed his hands at the horse, and she kind of responded and picked it up a little bit here. And not flashy, but certainly a good maintenance move.
Yeah, my boy Jack on the Triple Crown Trail this year for Keith DeSormo. He won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile with Texas Red a few years ago. This is a filly Reflect, but again, purchased for $70,000 as a yearling, maximizing the horse flesh with Keith, which Keith is so good at doing. Second in the Alcibiades, last time behind Restless Rider, who was the 6-5 favorite, and she really finished with authority, Kate, and she was well clear of the horse that ran third. It was the best race she'd run in her young career, and it was also the first time she had gone around 2 turns, so another horse that's heading in the right direction.
Serengeti Empress out on the track for Tom Amos, breezed a few days ago, along with Lone Sailor, another very nice work. But unlike Lone Sailor, who is always a good workhorse, according to his trainer, Serengeti Empress really shows that she's an improving filly and is getting better with each of her works. And if she can improve off of a 19-length win in her most recent start, then look out in the juvenile fillies.
Her last 2 races were workouts. I mean, the race at Ellis 2 starts back, she won by 13.5. She was wrapped up late in that race. And speaking of being wrapped up, like Kate mentioned, 19.5 length victory in the Pocahontas. She was. I watched her go by me. It was like she was galloping. It looked like a workout that day. She absolutely crushed the competition. Tom Amos has mentioned in recent days that he wants to toughen her up. He's been working her in company. He wants her to have a little bit of competition. Like you mentioned earlier, Kate, and when you're trying to plan out these workouts, what does the horse need? Well, she's won her last 2 races by so many lengths that a little bit of competition in the morning is probably good for her. She's won here at Churchill Downs. We don't know how good she is.
She's not a robust-looking filly, but she's the type, and I've seen a lot of good horses who are like that they didn't really catch your eye in the morning, but boy, they look larger than life in the afternoon, and they almost fill up and fill out when they get out there, puff out when they see the competition. This is Topper T, tuning up for the juvenile one, trained by Bill Mott, owned by Gary Barber, Wachtel Stable and Company, and the son of Bellamy Road was beaten just a nose in the Shakopee Juvenile in Canterbury. He's only recently come to Bill Mott's barn, so this is the first look I've gotten of him, and if he's anything like his sire, he'll be a flashy-looking individual, because Bellamy Road was the type of horse who caught your eye, and he was also capable of working very quickly.
Yeah, this time of year you will see these young prospects, the 2-year-olds that are eventually going to turn 3 and baby, jump onto the Triple Crown Trail, purchased privately. Gary Barber in a partnership here, a horse formerly trained by Ray Tracy at Prairie Meadows, and did have a race at Canterbury as well. They look at these horses, they're looking for prospects. You get offered, whatever the price might be, and the connections that had the horse before have to decide whether or not they want to sell or they want to go on with the horse themselves. Everybody's looking for a prospect, Kate, whether it's for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile or eventually for the Kentucky Derby or Kentucky Oaks.
A lot of poise. This horse has a lot of poise and a presence on the track. And also very leggy. I suspect this is a real strong-looking horse who's going to, when he's all grown up, going to be a pretty big individual. You can see that he got a little excited when the horses inside of him came on by and wanted to do more. Exercise rider kind of takes him to the outside, rocks back, the rider does, to shift the body weight and kind of give a subtle message to the horse, slow down.
Yeah, we're just getting news, and we saw Kevin Kirsty in an interview earlier with Gabby GADOT. He's reporting that we're going to add Catholic Boy to the work tab tomorrow at 7:30 in the morning. We just saw Catholic Boy on the racetrack, and Catholic Boy scheduled for a breeze tomorrow. And speaking of classic horses, here's Yoshida.
Yoshida, also trained by Bill Mott, was successful on the turf and then shifted well to the dirt. Was a little surprised when he came up with a huge come-from-behind victory, but has found a new home on the main track, and he is a grand-looking individual. Really powerful hindquarters. You can see he covers a lot of ground with his stride, even when he's just galloping. He has a really nice head carriage. His rider has her irons fairly long, and is able to kind of just get him into that nice, easy rhythm, and hopefully she doesn't have to shift her hands or shift her weight at any point as they go around there.
Belmont winning the Classic with Cigar, and then the big upset right here under the Twin Spires with Drosselmeyer a few years ago for Windstar Farm, etc. Yoshida, the jury, I think, even though he won the Woodward, is still out whether or not he's a better horse on dirt or turf, but it's nice to have that versatility. In the Woodward, it wasn't a very strong addition to the race. Seeking the Soul and Gunnevera were the co-favorites. Gunnevera ran a really good race to be second right now on the outside looking in of the Classic, but Yoshida ran tremendously well that day. He was hung dead wide on the turn. He finished with authority that particular afternoon to win by 2 lengths, and he deserves a spot and a chance in the Classic off of the victory in the Woodward. He certainly has looked good here in his training.
Yeah, his workout was very nice. It was, I think, what the trainer was expecting. He's kind of continued ever since that win to maintain as far as his works are concerned. I thought in New York before shipping in the video that I saw, he looked a little bit more even-keeled and just would bow his neck, and as opposed to this where he seems to be kind of reacting to everything. But that could be just getting here in the cool weather, and especially the slop on the track is kind of that X factor that'll make horses get a little bit more jittery or a little bit more excited. But he's a beautiful looking individual who's certainly maintaining his flesh, his weight, his coat looks amazing, and he's kind of what Beaumont's horses look like every time they go to the paddock, which makes it very hard for those of us who handicap off of looks, because they all, when they come from that barn, look sensational.
Yeah, it's like when you're in the paddock and you see a Steve Asmussen or a Beaumont horse walk by, and you're like, wow, that horse looks good. And then you say to yourself, wow, that's a Steve Asmussen or a Beaumont or a Todd Pletcher as some examples.
Baby Nina for the juvenile fillies is out on the track. Tito's Handmade Vodka Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies at 1 1/16, and Baby Nina for Anthony Corderola and Luch Racing was out training just about a minute ago or so. She broke her maiden in the Miss Ohio at Thistledown, has only 1 start around 2 turns. That was a 3rd place finish in the slop in a stakes race at Thistledown. But she does have the benefit of having run around 2 turns as opposed to some others who will come in and don't have the same experience from a fitness and conditioning standpoint. That is a plus.
Yeah, well, I mean, Luch is willing to take a chance, right? They dropped a bomb with Rhea Antonia in this race just a few years ago. This horse on paper looks like she's going to have to run twice as fast as she has in recent starts. But again, they have that prior experience of winning a Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies with a long shot, Rhea Antonio. So why not take a shot there in the body of the race?
Quartetto de Cordas is schooling in the gate, and that is something we haven't seen thus far on Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup. But very standard procedure for any horse, much less a Breeders' Cup horse, is to go and practice or school in the gate. And a lot of people wonder why you would actually stand a horse in the starting gate when the whole goal is to break out of the gate running, and why you wouldn't do that more regularly, or why go through this type of a process. But the key is having a horse relaxed when they're standing in the gate prior to breaking. Breaking is actually a natural instinct. The doors open, the horses go. That comes easily most of the time. The key is making sure that before the doors open, they're not trying to go, so that they break unevenly or stumble or break so quickly that they're discombobulated. So the process is gradual in the beginning, and then throughout a horse's career, a lot of horsemen will bring horses back, especially if the horse gets very nervous when they get around the starting gate, to take those nerves away and to establish a comfort level with the gate crew as well. And in this case, you'll see the doors are closed. They just walk the horse in. The assistant starter might give him a pat and just try to see any quirks the horse might have as well. Maybe they don't like to have a person holding on to them. And especially horses coming in from overseas, other countries where the process in the starting gate might be very different. They like to know how a horse is going to respond if they do take a hold of them.
And Ian Wilkes has probably talked to members of the gate crew and said, hey, this horse does this. This horse might have this little bit of a quirk. It's nice not only for the horse to get familiar with the gate, but also for the gate crew to get familiar with the horse.
Exactly. And this, without incident, I would imagine Quartetto de Cordas has been there before since coming to Ian's barn. You just keep doing what seems to be working. If it's establishing a good pattern and a good rapport, then you just go over there and make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's crossed. So far as the gate's concerned, the same with the paddock, the same with every point of a race. You simulate as best you can all the circumstances, but you don't need to do the hardest parts, which breaking out of the gate or running full speed. You save all that for race time.
It's going to be a big crowd here. The environment is going to be electric. You're going to have, in most cases, a full field, whether it's 10, 12, or 14 horses loading into the starting gate. If you draw one of those early post positions, you may have to stand in the starting gate for a minute, 2 minutes, and if horses act up even longer than that. So gate manners are very, very important, and as we know very well, Kate, in the gate break in any race. I mean, if you're an owner, a trainer, a jockey, that break is critical because positioning into that first turn or in one-turn races early in the race is critical to what's going to happen in the rest of the race.
We have another baby to take a look at. I think that's kind of the most fun because you see the most differences between the 2-year-olds. I believe this is TRACKSMITH, cross-entered for the juvenile turf. As well as, I believe, the juvenile turf sprint. And TRACKSMITH with the lead pony just to keep him under control. He's by Street Sense, who was able to parlay a win in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile into a win in the Kentucky Derby the following year. Has also been a prolific sire in his own right. TRACKSMITH's owned by the Calumet Farm and trained by Joe Sharp. And though he was beaten in the Bourbon, he was only beaten a couple lengths for all of it and was second beaten just ahead in the Kentucky Downs Juvenile at a mile on the turf after breaking his maiden. He'll be making his 4th start in the Breeders' Cup.
He's a nice little horse. I mean, he's cross-entered. He's hoping to get into one of the spots. It's interesting with this pedigree Caden by Street Sense out of a Medaglia de Oro mare that has been turf exclusive to this point. Doesn't mean that they won't try dirt at some point in the career, but Joe Sharp electing to stay on the grass with TRACKSMITH, probably has an opportunity to get to dirt at some point. And again, Joe Sharp is stabled here in Kentucky. The horse is on the grounds or very near the grounds, either at Keeneland or the training center. And the horses run some big races, just missed in the Kentucky Downs Juvenile, as you mentioned, behind a nice horse in Henley's Joy, and then came back with a similar performance with an outside post and showing forward speed in the Bourbon where he was only beaten a couple of lengths. So he deserves a chance if he's able to get in.
We're going to have some workout times for you, and we'll pass those along as we get them. The times obviously are recorded immediately after the works by the clockers, and then usually they're given to the trainers via walkie-talkie. On the back side, there'll be spotters at the gap that can convey that information, and then eventually we get it. A lot of the times we get it through Kevin.
Yeah, right, and there you see the times on your screen. And visually, they didn't look like they were going that fast. It speaks to how tight probably the track is after being sealed.
It tends to, when it gets this type of moisture in it and with the sealing process, get faster and faster unless you continue to have rain, in which case sometimes if the track had horses running and training over it and the rain was coming down and permeating the track, it would get a little bit slower. But Signalman going in 47 and 61 hundredths for a half a mile, and Reflect going in a minute flat, both of those pretty good moves. And as we saw, they looked to be doing it well within themselves too, and that's a sign of a good horse when you see a fast time and it doesn't look like they're going that fast.
Get them back to the barn, get them cooled out, give them a bath. Tomorrow morning, probably walk the shed row. Some trainers will elect to jog very lightly, depending on the individual horse. And now all the heavy lifting is done. Now it's just a matter of getting to race day.
As the horses continue to train, let's familiarize ourselves with the order of the races and the schedule for Future Stars Friday, the first time ever in the history of the Breeders' Cup that all the 2-year-old Breeders' Cup races are grouped on one day to kick things off. We have 5 Breeders' Cup races on Friday, starting with the Juvenile Turf Sprint, followed by race number 6 on the program, the Juvenile Fillies Turf. Then race 7 is the Tito's Handmade Vodka Juvenile Fillies. The 8th finds Juvenile Turf, and the final Breeders' Cup race on Future Stars Friday. Race number 9 is the Sentient Jet Juvenile, which of course is kind of the cornerstone race of Glamour Division, with the people trying to get a line on their Kentucky Derby hopefuls. Generally speaking, the horse that wins the Breeders' Cup Juvenile is the early favorite for the next year's Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, and the first post on Friday is going to be 12:55 Eastern Time, 3:21 for the first Breeders' Cup race. Caton, earlier post times on Saturday, 10:30 in the morning, 12 o'clock for the first Breeders' Cup race. And look at this. I mean, I get chills looking at it, just the scheduled races that we're going to see on both Friday and Saturday, and the new theme, Future Stars Friday, leading into the older horses on Saturday.
We are going to take a short break, but we're going to allow you to relive some important Breeders' Cup memories, moments that happened here at Churchill Downs. And for one Hall of Famer in particular, he's made his mark not only on the Breeders' Cup with 20 career wins, but also with a number of them here under the Twin Spires. Not only is he successful in the Kentucky Derby on numerous occasions, but again, think of it, 20 Breeders' Cup success stories for D. Wayne Lucas. Enjoy.
And we're ready for the start of the first Breeders' Cup in Kentucky, and they're off. Gulch broke alertly on the outside. Calistoga is away quickly. Mining was also away well, and toward the inside, it's Very Subtle and Olympic Prospect. Olympic Prospect and Very Subtle, and those two will fight it out early, and Mining is right there and fighting early in third. Precisionist is hustled up on the inside, fourth. Calistoga fifth on the outside. Roman is up close. He's just 5 lengths off the lead. Play the King is now running seventh on the outside. And then it's Gulch now racing in 8th position. Then farther back, Ready Jet Go is now 9th toward the rail. High Bright is racing in 10th. A Fleet, the Canadian, is 11th. Then on the extreme outside, it's Sylvan Express, and Mossif now is launching his bid from the back of the pack. The quarter was a quick one, 21 seconds flat, and it is Olympic Prospect now who comes to the top of the stretch with the lead by a length. Last year's winner, Very Subtle, now running at him from the inside. Precisionist is right there, racing in 3rd position, and in between horses, Gulch is right there, 4th. On the outside, Play the King now, and they're down to the final furlong. Very Subtle has now taken the lead. On the outside, Play the King is charging hard. Gulch is right there. Gulch emerging with the lead. Play the King. It's Gulch. Play the King. Here's the wire, and Gulch has won it. And a salute of victory from Angel Cordero Jr. Gulch coming from slightly off the pace, and he goes on to outgame Play the King in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. In the gate, ready for the start, and they're off, and Coax Chelsea was off slowly a length, also off a step slow with Seattle Meteor, and they pass us now for the first time. One of a Kind has asked for run early. Eloquent Minister is right there, and in between horses, Some Romance. So those three now will vie for the lead. Stocks Up has come out running in 4th position. Sequay is now 5th toward the inside. A Firm Classic is running in 6th position early. Derby Shuffle has come away racing 7th. The Calumet Filly, Leah Lucinda, is now 8th. Seattle Meteor now goes to the outside for clear running. Then it's Approved to Fly toward the rail. Open Mind is next, and she is better than 15 lengths off the lead. Coax Chelsea a long shot, lags behind as they continue up the backstretch. Moving over to the half-mile pole, it is still Eloquent Minister holding on to the lead by a length and a half. One of a Kind on the outside. Some Romance is now 3rd. Gary Stevens asking him for more and run now, and she's moving through in between horses. Then farther back, Stocks Up now is asked for more run. 3 furlongs from the wire. Sequay is now kept close to the pace. Just 4.5 lengths off the lead as they move midway around the far turn. Then it's Derby Shuffle next. Then farther back, Seattle Meteor is launching her bid for the back of the pack. A Firm Classic. Leah Lucinda is moving to the outside now as the field turns for home. Some Romance now is sent through and opening toward the inside. Sequay is now set for the drive and darts to the inside. On the far outside, Seattle Meteor closing in. Leah Lucinda is also right there. Open Mind is moving through. Approved to Fly is also right there. And a Firm Classic. It is wide open. Anyone's race. Derby Shuffle moving into contention. Approved to Fly is there. Some Romance. Open Mind flying on the outside. Derby Shuffle. Open Mind now emerging with the lead. Derby Shuffle. Open Mind wins it going away. There were 8 of them across the track at the 8th pole, and the Juvenile Fillies was decided in the final furlong. As Open Mind comes from off the pace, Cordero does it again. Score now, 2-5 in the gate, and they're off. Music Mercy broke like a bullet, comes right out for the lead, double quick. is going to run with him early now. Double Quick is there. Is It True is hustled away from the gate as the field moves into the first turn. Is It True and Double Quick now. Those two run at each other early. It's 2 lengths. My Hair's Red saving ground on the inside third. Music Merci is alongside fourth by 2. Into Bucks came away in 5th position. And then it's Leading Prospect, who's in hand, racing in 6th. Easy Goer has settled in 7th place now. He's about 8 lengths off the lead as they make their way onto the backstretch. The trailers are European Tegel, Dr. Bazaar toward the inside, and the early trailer is Mountain Ghost as they continue up the backstretch. Is It True on the inside with heavy pressure from Double Quick. Those two moving at a demanding pace as they continue up the backstretch. Maher's Red is trying to stay with those two in third. Leading Prospect now has asked for more run toward the inside. And Music Merci now is putting in his run as the field moves into the far turn. Then it's into Bucks. And now Easy Goer is starting to find his stride. Tegel is alongside him. Those two are now 7 lengths off the lead of Is It True, who has turned back the early challenge of Double Quick. But on the outside, the Californian Music Merci now looms boldly in second. And Easy Goer now continues to gain for the back of the pack. 6 lengths off the lead as the field turns for home. Tegel is floated outside him. They're set down for the drive. Is It True? Full out now to hold off Music Merci. And Easy Goer looms boldly now, a threatening presence on the outside. They're in the final furlong. Is It True? Pink Eye all over him. Easy Goer closing on the outside, a 60th from home. Is It True? Trying to hold on. Easy Goer can't get to him. It is It True who goes on to win it by a length. Easy Goer is defeated, and farther back it was Tegel. Pin Kai went to that strong whip, his trademark in the stretch.
It never gets old. You know, Is It True got his name because someone said, is this horse for real? Is it true? And it was indeed a huge Breeders' Cup for Wayne Lucas here at Churchill Downs.
Responsible horse naming. I love it. I also love those old school graphics.
And open mind because of where she came from, something about her background, and Wayne said, let's keep an open mind on this.
There you go. See, perfect. And some of those horses are favorites, and then there's his brigade of long shots as well. When you've won 20 of them, there's a lot of different great stories and great horses behind it.
We've been seeing a lot of Catholic Boy, who has spent quite a bit of time preparing here at Churchill Downs and discussed a lot about the important role his exercise rider has played in his development. Gabby's standing by with that person.
Kaiten, thank you so much. You being an exercise rider yourself, me being an exercise rider myself, we all know how important an exercise rider's role is in the barn. And here with Tracy Brown, the exercise rider of Catholic Boy, you've been aboard him pretty much his entire career, Tracy. What has he been like from a 2-year-old to a 3-year-old? How do you think he's changed?
From a 2-year-old to a 3-year-old, he was just a little kid, pretty much like a little 2-year-old child, and he grew quite a bit between his 2-year-old and 3-year-old year. Last year, this time at the Breeders' Cup, he had less substance. He wasn't as strong. His mind was more of a baby mind, but he has grown leaps and bounds in the last year, gotten stronger, smarter, more patient, just a really more competitive horse all around.
What's he like to ride on a day-to-day basis? Because I at least saw 2 different horses in the last 2 days. Yesterday, really keen, on his toes. Today, such a classy actor.
He is the kind of horse, if it's quiet around him, he's pretty quiet. He thrives on competition. So when he's around a lot of horses, he tends to get a little more on the muscle and more competitive, especially when horses are in front of him. He likes to catch them, so I try to let him do that slowly in the morning as we're galloping. But yeah, he's a pretty competitive horse even in the morning when he sees horses around. By himself, he's more relaxed and he's more aware of what's around him.
So what did he do today? It looked like a little bit more of an abbreviated gallop.
Well, we always go on the track and walk off and stand for a minute and let him take everything. He likes to stand and watch other horses train. And then we jog off to the wire, which is probably about 3/4, 5/8 of a mile. And then we gallop about a mile and 3/16, a mile and a quarter sometimes, depending on the day. But that's pretty much all he does every day.
He's very fit, and he gets his fitness, especially through those really strong gallop outs and his works. But he also gallops in unusual equipment called a German martingale. So how could you describe that, and what does that help you with as a rider?
It helps keep his head down and helps him use his hind end better. He, like you saw today, when he's by himself, he tends to bring his head up more, and which disengages his hind end. With those draw reins, it reminds him that, or the German martingale reminds him to keep himself collected. And when he gets a little strong, it also keeps his head and everything collected, so he doesn't get all out of sorts and
gives you a little bit of leverage.
It gives me a little leverage too. Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Now, you do ride him pretty short. Do you ride every horse short, or do you hike up those irons a little bit for him?
A little shorter for him. That's for sure. Yes, but everything I ride short. I have better balance up short.
One final question. Of course, he's leading into the Breeders' Cup Classic this year. Last year, he was leading into the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, a big race in its own right. But do you get nervous at all, in the lead up to a big race?
I get a little nervous, but I think I get more excited because we have a bond, and I just want him to do good. I want good for him and the team, of course, and Jonathan. And it's more, I think, anxiety of him just being okay and doing good and performing at his best, because I want to do my job good, which makes him do his job good. But yeah, I think I get a little bit nervous, definitely.
Some butterflies for sure.
Definitely butterflies, yes.
Well, Tracy, thank you so much for joining us here this morning. Great insight and a great perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Kaiten, back to you.
Always a lot of fun to get to see the faces and the personalities of the people who are on the horses. Normally, we get very little opportunity to chat to the people behind the scenes who play such an important role.
Great insight, too.
And fun to think of how exciting it is a time for Tracy and for everyone surrounding Catholic Boy. There's a look at Bellafina. First look that we've had here at Churchill Downs. Bellafina had been training in California. She's trained by Simon Callahan. She was pre-entered in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies and is likely to be, if not the favorite, one of the favorites, coming off 3 consecutive graded stakes wins, the Sorrento, the Del Mar Debutante, and the Chandelier, which she won by an amazing 6.5 lengths over Vibrance.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of the win in the Del Mar Debutante. Her stride down the lane was a little bit choppy. She had a great trip that day, but she cleaned up her act in the Chandelier, I thought, with the way she ran. Another dominating victory on paper, but also much more impressive, I thought, visually. She was clearly best that day. She won under a hand ride. She defeated Vibrance, who I thought ran well that day in her own right. When you've won 3 consecutive graded stakes in Southern California by open lengths as a juvenile filly, chances are you're going to be the favorite in the Tito's Handmade Vodka Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies.
And when horses, I don't know if this is her first look at Churchill. It's our first look at her,
It's
but
our
it
first
has
look
to
at
be
her,
one of the first times that she's been out here. So she may well take a little bit more time. You see the pony with her right now. You might not see the pony continuing on if she gallops, but a lot of times, too, when horses come into new surroundings, the trainers will opt to send the pony with them just as a security blanket, really. It's like going to a new neighborhood with a friend versus going all by yourself. The first time around, it's really nice to have the company. And
I just hope I have my GPS when I go to a new neighborhood.
I have to have my GPS when I go in my home neighborhood, so I never leave home without it. Filly is really a pretty filly, striking. It's the first time I've seen her in the flesh, and you can see the muscle definition in her hindquarters with that line that runs from her rump at the top of the tail back to where the leg attaches. A lot of times you can see the level of fitness and how much a horse is able to use their hindquarters by how well defined and developed the muscle tone is through the hindquarters, and she does have that. It's a lot of push from behind.
She's passed every test. She broke her maiden going 5 furlongs at Los Alamitos, then extended herself to 6 furlongs at Del Mar in the Sorrento, 7 furlongs at Del Mar in the Debutante, and then first try around 2 turns on the Chandelier last time out. So Simon Callahan following a plan with her. Not only has she been winning in dominant fashion, she has the experience of having 4 races under her belt and a 2-turn victory as well. She's got natural speed, but she's rateable too. And again, post positions drawn Monday, Caton, at 4 o'clock Eastern time. We're going to have full fields in all of these races. Post positions are going to be very, very important, especially with horses with speed, to find out who draws inside and outside of who.
Just a little jog going on right now as she jogs past the chute, and will continue on. Got that big old shadow roll, and you can tell she's got a long neck, so you wouldn't want her to get her head too high. She could probably look around an awful lot, so it's a pretty big shadow roll to keep her focused and maybe lower her head carriage just a little tiny bit, but a really elegant looking filly. Tito's Handmade Vodka Juvenile Fillies carries a purse of $2 million, a mile and a 16th in the list of horses pre-entered.
Yeah, Bellafina won the Chandelier by 6. Jaywalk won the Frisette by almost 6. Restless Rider won the Alcibiades by more than 2. Serengeti Empress won the Pocahontas by 19. Sipacan Harbor was visually impressive from way off the pace to win the Spinaway by 2 lengths. Something's got to give.
This is one of the few races on the Breeders' Cup card that did not overfill. Right. So all these fillies will have an opportunity to run, and we would expect to see them all in the entries come entry time on Monday. In a race like this, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies at a mile and a 16th with a field of 11 potentially, how important do you feel the post is going to be, Joe?
I think it's important because you do have horses with speed like Bellafina, like Jaywalk, like Serengeti Empress. You know, if you're one of those horses, you want to be drawn outside of the other speed, but not too far outside at the same time. Question for you when it comes to Bellafina, Caden. This is a horse that has been stable in Southern California her entire career. At least for quite some time, she hasn't felt weather like this. How do you think she's reacting to it? I would guess in a very positive way. You know, horses tend to like it a little bit cooler, and she's certainly getting those conditions here in Louisville.
Well, you know, they've had some unseasonable weather in California, which I think might actually be a plus for the horses that are shipping here. But lately, it's nothing compared to this. That's to be sure. And for them, they get off the plane and they've got to feel great because they're breathing in that clear, crisp air as opposed to a little bit warmer, or there's no humidity in California, so they don't have to contend with that. But I do think that they tend to be cool weather creatures, really do enjoy it when they get here. The other way can be a little bit tougher mountain to climb when horses would ship to California from cooler climates, especially if they've already got their winter coats. But keep in mind that it's not climate that causes the change in coats for horses. It's their biological clock that will tell them, you know, it's the time of year to start shedding and put on a winter coat and such. And trainers have a lot of ways of tricking the horses' biological clocks and their response to light and darkness in terms of that. So most of them have, they've clipped horses if need be. If they're going to a warmer climate, they let them grow their winter coats in spite of being in a warmer climate if they know they're going to a cooler climate.
Kind of like when it's 75 degrees in early October and the leaves are still changing.
Exactly. We're going to take a look at some colts for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Mile and a 16th Centujet Juvenile carries a purse of $2 million. And this race is a deep one. Features horses with undefeated records on both coasts. I'm going to start with the Tight 10 for Steve Asmussen and Winchell Thoroughbreds, colt by Tappet. It's out galloping. And one thing, we talked a lot about trainers and their various styles, and it is usually pretty easy to spot a Steve Asmussen trained horse just by the way they carry themselves on the track, the way their riders put their horses in a frame. You generally see the neck bowed. You'll see the horse having a bit of a hold on the reins versus a lot of slack. I think Steve's philosophy would be to try to balance the horse, but get him to use himself front end and all muscles from the hind end as well in unison, so that rather than a real loose rein and a loose, easy way of striding around there, it's a more controlled, balanced frame-like type of presentation on the track. And it's a way you can see that he feels he gets the most out of his horses.
Just like any sport, coaching-wise, there are different methods of doing things that all lead to success. We've talked over the course of the show about Dwayne Lucas's methods and Bill Mott's methods and all the great trainers that we have here on the grounds, Steve Asmussen being one of them. This is a horse that is very precocious, probably one of the most precocious horses in his barn. Steve won, I believe, 11 races this spring in the 2-year-old ranks at Churchill Downs alone. Had a little bit of a drier spell when he came back here in September, but still did well at Saratoga. But Tight 10 has been progressive all along. Broke the maiden in June, ran in the Saratoga Special, ran second in the Iroquois over this racetrack behind Cairo Cat, who has suffered a little bit of a setback. We won't see him in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. But this is a horse that is an early developing sort, and Steve is really good at saying, okay, here are my precocious ones. Here are horses that need a little bit more time, and they all seem to find their stride at the time when he thinks it's best for them.
This horse impressed me yesterday and today with his maturity and the way he looks on the racetrack. He is just a very solid-looking individual, very poised. Goes out there like he's an older horse, a seasoned pro. Really like what I see from him, and he, like many of them, seems so happy out there and seems to be into his work. Very professional.
He tries hard. Natural speed is his weapon. He showed it sprinting, and he showed it in the Iroquois. He battled every step of the way in that particular race. The pace wasn't overly fast, but it was the kind of racetrack that maybe favored horses that came from a little bit out of it that particular day. Either way, he dug in. He's the kind of horse that wants to get early position, maybe not make the lead, but be in a pace pressing spot throughout the race, and maybe try to make his move off the turn for home and try to hold on for as big of a piece of it as he possibly can. He's definitely going to be facing some bears in this field.
And you saw him finishing up nicely as well in that gallop in terms of really getting into a nice, comfortable rhythm. And that's the only point at which the rider's able to kind of ease off the reins and the contact with the mouth and kind of let the horse go about. But that was a very nice gallop. Sentient Jet Juvenile includes Derby Date. This happened earlier this morning. In case you missed it, we want to show it to you again. Derby Date will be making his 5th career start. He is a maiden, but he was second in a maiden special weight at Saratoga, going 7 furlongs. And Wayne Luke is sending him out early this morning, one of the first horses on the track. You can see him close to the inside there, and the light on the exercise rider's helmet to help him be spotted around the track, and also to help others be able to see him, stay out of his way. So looks like a fast type of horse to me, just by the way that he moves. He was quick away from the pole. He has kind of that strong sprinter-like shoulder, and you can see him kicking out his front legs nicely, finishing well. And this looked visually like a nice work. He was well within himself throughout, but he finishes on cruise control. You don't see the rider having to urge him to do more. He's doing it all on his own, and it was a fairly fast time.
By first crop sire Will Take Charge, who definitely seems to be stamping his babies. This horse learned a lot, I think, in the Breeders' Futurity, Caden. Post 12 of 13, was hung 6 wide on the first turn, was moving 3 wide on the turn, kind of making a middle move, and then flattened out that day. But that was the first try around 2 turns. It was an adventurous trip. Probably learned something from that race, and again, on the outside looking in, the Breeders' Cup Juveniles right now, but a horse that certainly would appear to have a bright future.
That was Tight 10. Derby Day, and look at his time was 48 and 21/100ths for a half a mile. Other workouts for horses that we've seen so far today: Reflect went 5 furlongs in a minute, and Signalman 47 and 61/100ths, giving you a little perspective on how others are working over the track. Track is going to play differently at different times of the day, depending on the weather conditions. And you'll see a very different type of track today than we saw yesterday at this time when Mr. Money worked out 5 furlongs in 59 and 3/5 of a second. This was a good work, I thought.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good work, too. This horse began his career at Ellis Park They've really stepped up their game at Ellis with an increase in purses. A lot of horses that may have gone to Saratoga have stuck around that are based here in Kentucky or in the Midwest. And Mr. Money's second on debut, a little bit of a disappointing third in his second career race. But Caden, when this horse stretched out around 2 turns at Churchill on closing day, September 28th, won very professionally. He was shuffled out to the pocket, loomed boldly 3 wide, really responded when asked, defeated, I thought, a pretty good field for the level. And you talk about that learning experience, and you never know what horses are going to do best. This is a son of Golden Sense, the leading first crop sire right now. But that 2-turn debut was very good, and this workout shows that this horse is moving in the right direction too. He's certainly capable of maybe surprising a few people in the juvenile.
It surprised me. This wasn't a horse on my radar until I saw that workout, but I liked what I saw quite a bit. Complexity is one of the undefeated horses we spoke of that will be competing in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He is still in New York for Chad Brown. We're going to take a look, courtesy of the New York Racing Association, for this workout. This happened yesterday, and I believe that a number of trainers moved up their work dates to yesterday to avoid any impending weather. Complexity working by himself, and 48 and 32 1/100ths. You can see a lot of poise there from this colt by McLean's Music. Ears are pricked, broad chest as he goes through the turn. You're going to see the lead change in a moment. He's on the inside lead, and there, swapped right to the outside.
Love it.
Effortless. If she were carrying a glass of water, wouldn't have spilled a drop. Now the ears go back through the stretch. At this point, maybe the rider asking for just a little bit more, and the horse's response, okay, I'll give it to you, but you shouldn't have to ask.
That's great. This horse is a very efficient mover. We saw that same lead change in the Champagne. This horse has speed, but it's controlled speed, which is exactly what you want. When you pay $375,000 for a son of McLean's Music at a yearling sale, the Keeneland September yearling sale, that's saying a lot. McLean's Music stands for only $25,000. This one out of a Yes It's True mare. This horse has done nothing wrong, Caton. Again, has natural speed, but it's controllable speed. This horse isn't running off. You know, this horse is just rating kindly. This happens to be very fast.
Another work from New York, Code of Honor, and I'm eager to see this one by Noble Mission. Broke his maiden at Saratoga, then came back in the 1 mile Grade 1 Champagne to finish second to Complexity. So we just saw the winner. Now we see the runner-up. And we see another equally impressive mover through the stretch here for Shug McGahee, a horse who had a lot of potential, a lot of talent, but Shug wondering, was he able to put it together right off the bat? He did. That question answered, and I thought he took a big step forward. He lost a lot at the gate. He stumbled badly leaving the starting gate of the Champagne and comes back into this work, and you can see him right on the fence toward the inside, all by himself. A minute, .71 Code of Honor, working at Belmont Park yesterday with video courtesy of the New York Racing Association. Just very strong, very steady, very professional. Really very nice workout.
This is another nice horse. Noble Mission, first crop sire. This one is a homebred for Bill Farish. And like you said, stumbled terribly at the start. Was 6 wide on the turn. Caton, a huge effort behind Complexity. I like both of these horses going into Saturday.
Next
going
up,
into Friday.
Current. Todd Pletcher's pre-entry for the juvenile turf was out working on the dirt. Again, this at Belmont Park. That big white blaze and that chestnut is easy to spot. A little bit higher head carriage, and you might see a little different action because, again, this is a horse who's tuning up for the turf. A lot of turf horses are not necessarily real flashy or real sharp dirt workers, but trainers will opt to work them on the dirt just to maintain. That's what they've typically done before they ever raced, and you just keep to the program. You know you're not always going to be able to get them on the grass to work out, so if you can get a horse into the pattern of working on the dirt and still able to run well on the turf, then you just stick to it.
We saw this with Catholic Boy last year where he was running on turf, ran in the Breeders' Cup juvenile turf, then eventually became a dirt horse this year. This horse, Curran, is by Curlin out of a Stormcat mare. You would think maybe dirt. Todd Pletcher did win this race in 2010 with Pluck. But when you have a horse early in their career, Caden, as a 2-year-old that needs 2 turns, many more opportunities on grass.
Let's go back to the West Coast now for another juvenile contender, perhaps the favorite in the race. Last week, Game Winner breezed at Santa Anita for Bob Baffert. So horse occupying a stall previously held by Justify, and before that, American Pharaoh. He's going to be on the outside in this work. Son of Candy Ride is undefeated in 3 starts, including the Del Mar Futurity and the American Pharaoh. And Bob Baffert also, like Chad Brown and like many other trainers, will communicate frequently with his riders on their horses in works via walkie-talkie or radio to be able to tell them exactly whether to speed up, slow down, stay together, let them gallop out, ease off, maintaining some level of control in what's otherwise a very uncontrollable situation oftentimes.
Who knows what Baffert has back there? I mean, we didn't see Justify until this spring, and he won the Triple Crown, right? Tale of the Union was a 2-year-old for Baffert I was very impressed with. But it's Game Winner that's carrying the torch into the Breeders' Cup. And why not? He's a perfect 3 for 3, broke the maiden at Del Mar, won the Del Mar Futurity over 7 furlongs, won the American Pharaoh at Santa Anita, defeated only 4 rivals in that race, Kate, and it was a workmanlike performance. But this horse has already shown not only talent but professionalism. He's a winner around 2 turns against Grade 1 Company. He's going to be one of the favorites, if not the favorite, in the Ascension Jet Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And I don't know. It's a fascinating race. We talked about complexity, Code of Honor, Game Winner. There's a lot of other horses with a lot of talent, too.
Now, you saw the rider actually asking Game Winner for some gallop out. He looks to me to be a very smart horse that does what he needs to do. Once he got past the competition, he didn't really feel like he needed to do any more. Hence, you saw the rider get a little busy and more active to remind him, no, you know what, I know you beat him, but we want you to keep going on. And he did that, and he did it nicely. Again, that was a while ago. We are waiting. Game Winner is going to have another workout coming up pretty soon. But that part of the fun, I think, Joe, to get the opportunity to see the horses in the flesh after watching them prepare and watching them race so long. I believe Bob Baffert's horse is expected to arrive Monday or Tuesday.
Right. And as far as Game Winner goes, again, you mentioned it in the workout, very similar to what he did in the American Pharaoh. It was a workout performance, a workmanlike performance. Maybe needs a little bit of urging to do what you need him to do, but again, at the same time, very professional. So he's coming into this race the right way.
You're going to see the activity die down a little bit behind us.
I don't hear anything.
There's a break, 2 breaks a day. The schedule will change, though, as more Breeders' Cup horses are on the track. There will be designated times for Breeders' Cup horses to train, only Breeders' Cup horses as opposed to the rest of the horse population, and then some periods of time where you'll see anybody can go out and train, and then a designated time for turf horses, weather permitting. So that kind of gets ironed out or in motion as we get a little closer to the day and more horses are on the grounds. In the meantime, the other horsemen have to kind of make accommodations and figure out to make way for the Breeders' Cup horses.
We're going to get a warm spell here. I just looked at the forecast. It's supposed to be in the upper 60s tomorrow, and that means windy conditions because you're getting, this weather coming from the south. You're going to get wind. You're going to get warmer weather. So it'll be interesting to see just how windy it gets with this warm front coming in. Again, not going to adversely affect training, you wouldn't think, but it's something to consider.
With all the focus on the juveniles in that last little segment, we thought it would be fun to take a look back on memory lane here at Churchill Downs, some juvenile Breeders' Cup moments.
Ready for the start in the juvenile, and they're off, and Bertrando comes out running. Agincourt is right there, and on the outside it's Starry Coot. But it is Bertrando, Alex Solis, intent on the lead, and he wins the race into the first turn. He's there by a length and a half. Starry Coot and Bag in close pursuit. Agincourt saving ground all the way. Devil on Ice was 5 ride, rounding the first turn. Showbrook is now racing 6th in between horses. Pine Bluff is under a firm hold at the inside, racing 7th. Big Sur is 8th on the outside. Onlooker is 9th. Try to Watch is 10th. He's about 10 lengths off the lead, and he's launching a bit now from the back of the pack. Then it's Dance Floor. Farther back, Snappy Landing and Arazi, the European star, is a dozen lengths from the front as Offbeat trails the field as they continue midway down the backstretch. Bertrando coasting on an uncontested lead, and he's moving at a quick pace. The quarter in 23 1. He gets a half in 46 3/5 seconds. It is still Bertrando out there unchallenged. He leads by 2. Long shot Agincourt still chasing second. Pine Bluff is only 3 lengths from the lead. Arazi hits his best stride, and there goes the European star Arazi, and he's coming with a menacing rush to Bertrando, and now the stage is set as they move toward the top of the stretch, and Arazi runs right by him. Arazi with a dramatic move as the field turns for home. He's wide into the stretch. Bertrando stunned at the inside with the move here of Arazi. He's pouring it on. Just incredible move as they come to the top of the stretch by 4 now. And then it's Bertrando, who is now a discouraged second farther back. It is Snappy Landing, and they're coming down to the finish here. Here indeed is a superstar. Arazi, absolutely brilliant. He was taken under a hard hold to win it here by 5, and he could have won by 10 perhaps. And Bertrando was second. Absolutely sensational.
And away they go. Circular Key took a little bump shortly after the start and is going to drop back last. Stormello is going to go on to set the early pace. Scat Daddy showing early speed, but he too was in tight and had a drop back. There's Principal Secret and Pegasus Wind on the outside. They're sprinting early on, just in behind the leaders now. We have got the last lap, and then there's Malt Magic. Scat Daddy is down at the rail, 3.5 off the leaders. King of the Roxy's up alongside of him. CP West is racing back into 8th position, giving them 7 length start. Up alongside of those two, we have Great Hunter now is towards the rear. Then we come back to Teufelsberg, being followed then by Skip Code, who's racing back 4th last. A long way back here to Street Sense, UD Getter, and Circular Key is last, and Circular Key's got to be 20 lengths off these leaders. They go to the half mile, and Principal Secret in the red colours takes the advantage, but they've been going some pace up here. Stormello's already ridden along down at the rail. Pegasus Wind. Now there goes Scat Daddy on the outside. He's hooked 4 wide, but Scat Daddy goes to take them on. CP West is running on behind that. And let's see Circular Key starting his run now. He's a good 12 off them. Circular Key making good ground if he can find a way through. And then Street Sense at the top of the lane. Pegasus Wind. Scat Daddy breathes down his neck on the outside. On alongside of those two now, here comes Great Hunter. And Great Hunter now just goes right on by them. Circular Key from last on the grandstand side. Homeward bound Circular Key coming out gamely on the centre of the track, but it's not going to get to Street Sense, who's gone well clear as they come for home now. And it's going to be Street Sense to win this one at distance. Street Sense could not have been more impressive. He romps. It'll be Circular Key second. Great Hunter finishes third, and Scat Daddy was fourth.
We called Street Sense a live long shot, just destroying this field as the favorite got caught up in traffic. Holy cow, that was impressive.
And away they go to a perfect start. They all broke out well. Riveting Reason is fast into stride on the outside. Uncle Mo. Stay Thirsty is right there, and JB's Thunder moving through down at the rail. Just in behind that comes Boys at Toscanova, who's taken back 6-5 off a fast pace up there. Berjan is in the pink colours on the far side. Biondetti in the blue down at the rail. JP's Gusto has been taken back today. JP's Gusto is third last, 8 lengths off the leaders. In behind that comes Rogue Romance, and Jay Cito caught it very wide. Jay Cito is running right out on the track with Mike Smith. Jay Cito on the extreme outside. They run to the 5/8 pole, and Riveting Reason's taken a hold of the bit. He's keen to go on, and Riveting Reason leads it by 2. Uncle Mo is in the perfect spot, though. A confident look back from John Velasquez on Uncle Mo. He's happy with his spot right there, second. On the far side, Boys at Toscanova. Down at the rail, JB's Thunder. Biondetti is in there as well. Stay Thirsty is only 3 lengths off these leaders as they bunch up. Then it's Rogue Romance. JP's Gusto being ridden along but not responding. In behind that comes Merjan. And YOSHIDA, obviously Sunningham has tailed off. They are coming to the top of the lane, and Riveting Reason desperate to hold on, but Uncle Mo is breathing down his neck, and Uncle Mo is let loose, and look at him stride away. Uncle Mo, big leaping strides, he's opening up. Boys on Toscanova is second, but this is an overwhelming performance by Uncle Mo, the son of Indian Charlie. John Velasquez just got to point him in the right direction, takes a look back. Uncle Mo, superb in the juvenile. It'll be Boys at Toscanova in second. Road Romance finished up third, and Biondetti ran on fourth.
It never gets old watching those scenes. Some of the most vivid and exciting moments, I think, when not only are you winning the Breeders' Cup, but you're also looking at the future and thinking what could happen. It's just amazing.
Well, for Street Sense, it happened in the Kentucky Derby, right? Not so much for his Arazi or Uncle Mo, but three of the most dominating performances you'll ever see in the juvenile by three amazingly talented 2-year-olds. That was fun to watch. And
actually, when you think of Arazi, too, it wasn't always about the Derby, but it was just about the way he did it that I think made so many people pause, and it was actually an audible gasp, I think, through the stretch, if I recall.
It was something else.
We're going to shift gears, but talk about some fast horses. Filly Mare Sprint is next to focus on at a purse of $1 million, 7 furlongs. And you can see that Moptism has first preference for the distaff. There were some changes which we heard about earlier.
Dream Tree out.
Dream Tree is out. And we don't know, Bob Baffert had previously announced rider assignments for his 2 horses in the race. I'm not sure
Marley's
if there's...
Freedom now will be Mike Smith.
Mike Smith on Marley's Freedom instead. There's a look at one of the competitors, Miss Sunset, who is, this is another one that we're getting our first look at. Miss Sunset is coming in from California. And, well, actually, I take that back. We saw her at Keeneland when she ran 4th to Golden Mischief in the Thoroughbred Club of America, but she's stabled in California for Jeff Bondi, has a lot of early speed, and will be making her 3rd start off the layoff in the Breeders' Cup. And she's another that I suspect is getting one of her first looks of Churchill Downs.
Yeah, I was surprised she was bet down to 8-5 favoritism in the TCA at Keeneland. She was in the pocket. She kind of just ran evenly all the way around there. The race won by Golden Mischief. But I really liked the way she galloped out. She galloped out in front. It was kind of a strange performance from her in that she was bet down. She did not run up to expectations, particularly from the people that backed her at 8-5, but then she galloped out great. So this is a horse that's got a lot of natural talent. She's been dominant at times in Southern California. This is one, Kate, and I think could go either way, and at the right price, I would definitely be willing to consider her at least in the Exacta Strides and Supers.
And just a little light jog. You know, the way the racetrack is today because of the elements has led some of the trainers, too, to probably back off their training matches. We saw Brad Cox and others decide to push back works till tomorrow. You'll also see some trainers opt, rather than gallop or full-out gallop or 2-minute clip, as we saw Mind Your Biscuits do yesterday, just do a more controlled type of routine, a little jog here, or if there is a gallop, a more controlled, a little bit slower gallop. And that's real common when you have a lot of rain. Horsemen will take a more cautious approach.
Yeah, combined with the fact that she's new to Churchill, just like we saw a little bit earlier with Bellafina, just trying to take in the surroundings and, like you mentioned, based on the track condition, maybe not do too much, just trying to get settled in.
So you know that she's not going to do very much because she's equipped on her front hooves, if you look underneath the bandages, with what's called bell boots, and they're actually rubber protective gear that goes right over the top of the hoof. Again, that's just to protect them, to keep them, if they were to overreach or overstep and strike their hoof, instead they hit the rubber rather than the skin or the flesh. You don't see bell boots when horses are galloping because there's the risk that they're going to get dislodged.
Right.
But you'll often see horses come over to the paddock with bell boots. You'll see it frequently if all they're doing is jogging or something more controlled, where they might get a little bit more active. And you also see them in show horse world more frequently. But again, the faster pace, you would never see bell boots on a horse.
Right, and there you go. So what you see is what you get. She's not going to do any more than this.
She's pretty, though. She's got a pretty expression, and she seems like she's enjoying taking it all in. We saw earlier today a horse who's right at home at Churchill. That's Mia Mischief. She was out for Steve Asmussen, and again, similar to her stablemate that we saw earlier, same kind of frame that she'll gallop in. Exercise riders ride just a little bit shorter than some of the others, and she usually takes a little hold of the bit to begin with and then is able to kind of stretch her neck out just a bit more as she gets into the gallop.
Yeah, we heard Dream Tree scratching from this race. She's a 3-year-old filly who was undefeated. Mia Mischief, also a 3-year-old filly who's had a really good year this year against her own set. She has never faced older horses, and Caton, a 3-year-old, has never won the filly and mare sprint. They are 0 for 11. That being said, she's at home. She's talented. I look forward to even bigger and better things from her next year. But again, she will make an impact on this race because she's one of the horses that will be out there and winging it early.
Let's check in with Gabby.
Thank you, Caton. We'll hear with Jeremiah Engelhardt, who is sending out 40 under in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. And Maya, he worked yesterday, and what were your thoughts of his work?
I was pretty happy with his work and the way he got over the ground. I was a little nervous at first on whether or not to work him on the dirt or the turf, but felt like he'd probably benefit from going over the surface, and worked slow the first quarter and then finished up really well. So overall, I was pretty happy with that.
In terms of, what to do, you are based out of New York. You've shipped in here with a couple of horses. How do you use the relationships with trainers to your advantage, and what's that communication like?
Well, the first person I called yesterday was Tom Amos because of, he's very familiar here with everything, whether it's the turf course, whatever it is. So good place to eat, I'm going to use Tom. But no, I called him to see what he would do and recommend because, like I said, I was hemming and hawing whether or not the turf course was going to be good enough to work over. And he basically said, he goes, listen, if you feel like you're going to want to, a good trip over it, I'd work him over it. And so that's what I did. And I was actually really happy that I did.
What has struck you about this horse in particular, 40 under, and how he's kind of shown himself on the track in the afternoons? I mean, he's a horse that really seems to do everything right, at least in the afternoons.
Yeah, we were pretty high on him in his first start, and I was really surprised he ran the way he did. He didn't show anything in that first start, and then, we thought maybe that he might be a little bit better on the grass. He has, but people would say turf action, and Maggie had actually said something to me too after his first race, and so then we worked him on the turf, and I was really happy with the way he worked, and we ran him, and ran well in Saratoga, so just decided we're going to keep him there, and seems to be what he likes.
Now he's owned by Bill Parcells, August Dawn Farm. Excuse me, my mouth is a little frozen here from standing out here all morning. But is he going to be going out to Breeders' Cup weekend?
Yeah, I'm trying to get him out here. I think he's going to show up on Friday, but this is why he's in it. This is a Super Bowl for him, so hopefully he can bring that experience, and he'll get a big kick out of it. It's really special what the Breeders' Cup does. Even the whole week leading up to the races too. So he should be out here this weekend.
So from a trainer's perspective, I mean, you've got a lot of horses, primarily based out of New York, as previously mentioned. Shipping in with just 3 horses, what do you do with all your spare time?
I just sleep. I watch Netflix, movies in my hotel room. No, I don't know. It's like we did the sale before I came over here, and so I was pretty knocked out from the sale. So yesterday I did sleep pretty much all afternoon. I missed about 40 phone calls, but I have some clients here too, so we'll do some dinners and whatnot. But for the most part, I just kind of hang out. It is nice with just 3 horses, but you do a lot. You're on the phone, talking back to the strings back home and whatnot. But
you got to feel a little out of your element, though.
Oh, I'm very, I'm pretty much, every day I feel out of my element.
Well, has Tom Amos given you any good restaurants yet?
No, not yet. I'm usually when I come here, it's like I feel like barbecue. It's the only thing I want is barbecue. Anywhere else, it's steak, but here it's barbecue. I'm sure he'll give me some good restaurant tips.
Okay, well, our producer Terrence is telling me to tell you Hammerhead's best barbecue in the country, so write that down.
Hammerheads. I got it.
He's got it. I'm going to pull him aside here after this interview and give him a tip or two. And Caton, feel free to text us too, some advice. You've definitely lived in Louisville a little bit longer than I have.
Gabby, I was talking with you last night. I think we're hitting Frankfurt Avenue Beer Depot. Also, very good barbecue. But
Hammerheads is good.
It is.
Good beer list, too.
Very
Citra
good in
Hop
general.
IPAs.
You can't go wrong in Louisville. It's one of the best restaurant towns. That's the best kept secret, I think, of any place. So
a lot of good choices.
We'll get those texts going, and in the meantime, we will put some out on Twitter as well when we're all done with the show, just to give you some tips. But Turf Sprint is, I think, one of the most fascinating races as far as not having a strong opinion for me. I think you could go in so many different directions here. We're going to take a look at a couple horses on the track, but $1 million on the line. And you can see on the preference list, the horses are listed in order of preference. Those are horses who didn't qualify either via winning a Breeders' Cup Challenge race, a win-and-near-in race, or accumulating graded stakes points since the beginning of the year, or being selected by the panel. So those are waiting a chance to run. Chancelane, meanwhile, 6-year-old mare riding a 2-race win streak for Steve Asmussen. Tenbrook Farm is 4 for 7 on the turf, and her win in the Buffalo Trace was, I thought, a pretty workmanlike effort, and I think she can come back with the same type of race again under very different conditions here. She has to be respected.
Misdirection's the only filly to win this race. She did it in back-to-back years, and Steve Asmussen won the 2011 edition of the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint with Regally Ready. Chanceline, I agree with you completely. That was a workmanlike performance in the Buffalo Trace at Keeneland, coming off a little bit of a break. Ricardo Santana Jr. really knows her very well. She had kind of a claustrophobic trip that day. She rallied off heels and was able to get the job done over what I thought was a very deep and talented field that day. I know it's a grade 3 as far as the ranking system goes, but that race from top to bottom, there were several horses in there with fantastic turf sprint resumes. Chanceline was one of them, and she got the job done.
You see just a little bit of work out on the track here at Churchill. The blue colors of Steve Asmussen, easy to spot, very distinctive. Buchero is next, a 6-year-old, one of our elder statesmen in the Breeders' Cup, 11 for 30 lifetime earnings, approaching $1 million, though he's never won at Churchill on the turf. He's run some very good races and is coming off a victory in the Woodford.
An Indiana bred. What more? I mean, the whole state's rooting for him. I mean, this is a great story. This is a horse that has really developed over the course of time. 4-time winner last year, really putting himself on the map. Definitely fits well here. They brought this horse to Royal Ascot, where he did not disgrace himself at all. He ran 5th, was beaten a little bit less than 5 lengths at 40-1. Came back here, a little bit of a disappointing run in the Turf Monster at Parks. Didn't have the greatest trip that day, but the Woodford got back to his winning ways. Had a rail trip, came out 3 wide, dead aim on the leaders, and was able to get the job done over Will Call, who will be one of the names in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint as well that people will be gravitating to. So great stories, so many great stories in the Breeders' Cup. Caton Buchero, the Indiana bred, is one of them.
And Joe, one note about him, unlike most of the horses that we've seen this morning, you see a little lather on his neck. He's gotten a little bit warm. It's important to know Buchero is the type of horse who has a lot of nervous energy. He isn't in any distress. He isn't upset. It's just him, his way. Just like people. There are just some people who sweat more than others. And
right
particularly, well,
no.
More power to you. It is totally a little brisk right now on the set. But it's true. When you get into the ring, so to speak, or when you start exercising, when you start doing, that's when you see the traits of the horses come out and the personalities, much like people, and he is always like that. So you would be concerned if you didn't see that from him, but it's important to know his idiosyncrasies. He also can be, I don't want to say wild, but a lot in the paddock pre-race. He's just a high-energy type of horse, and that's how he expresses it. But he will run his races even if he is like that, a little bit unruly in the paddock or the pre-race.
That's a big part of handicapping, too, is knowing the horses And if I just saw any horse come out and I saw lather on the neck and it's 45 degrees outside, that would be troublesome to me, but not with this horse.
And you want to know the horse, but you also want to know the circumstances too, because no matter what, they're extending some energy before the race. So if it gets worse as they get closer to the gate, you might look at it as a negative, but on the whole, if that's the way the horse is, then it shouldn't concern you from the handicapping perspective. Next up, we'll take a look at the Classic and some announcements, some changes. As we mentioned, you're never going to see the full field until Monday. Then we'll have the post positions drawn Monday afternoon. We will be able to see how the field is set up and who is in, who's not. But in the meantime, some decisions to be made. And Tom Amoss, we're told by the Breeders' Cup that he's opted to run Lone Sailor in the Classic. He was also cross-entered, but he will go in the Classic. Some of the others we have yet to hear weigh in officially, but it sure sounds like definitely Mind Your Biscuits is sticking where he's at. He's got first preference, and he's going to run, Chad telling us yesterday. Roaring Lion also with second preference for the turf, and that camp has gone on record as stating that they are definitely running in the Classic. So a few people on the outside looking in at this point, waiting for a shot to get in, including Seeking the Soul, who's looking more and more likely to end up in the dirt mile rather than the Classic.
Yeah, and the connections of Toast of New York, what a great story. They're talking about running him in the marathon because at this point, with 4 horses in front of him, he's probably not going to get in to the Classic. What a great story. And speaking of great stories, here's your likely favorite for the Breeders' Cup Classic. Disappointing run in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile from Accelerate last year, but boy, is he taking his game to a new level.
This video, courtesy of XBTV, shot at Santa Anita back on the 20th, and Accelerate putting in it's typical, very sharp move, 5 furlongs, 59 and 4/5 of a second. You can see it happen fairly early in the morning. A little bit easier to see this one, though. Exercise rider is low to begin with as the horse breaks off. You can see he's traveling very nicely, kind of a fluid movement as the other horses in the background. You kind of can gauge how fast he's moving by how fast they go out of the frame. And he seems to be getting a little faster as he's going.
He's accelerating.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, the only time this horse left Southern California is the only time he lost this year. It was in the Oaklawn Handicap where he was defeated by a neck by City of Light as the 6-5 favorite. But since that time, Caton, he's been absolutely dominant. He has won 3 consecutive Grade 1s by a combined 18, 19, 20 lengths. Won the Pacific Classic by more than a dozen over Pavel, who is another horse who was expected to run in the Breeders' Cup Classic. And then he defeated West Coast last time out in the Awesome Again. That was the first time West Coast had run in quite some time, though, so maybe that horse will take a step forward. Either way, Accelerate is the deserving favorite.
I like this work. It was pretty even, but he did seem to pick it up a little bit more as he went, and that was on his own without any encouraging from the rider. The rider remained motionless all the way to the wire, and I really like to see that. And then Accelerate continued on through the gallop out pretty handily. So pretty nice move for Accelerate. John Sadler looking for his first Breeders' Cup triumph.
Yeah, 0 for 41. But two favorites this year.
Now, these are, again, XBTV provided the video of this workout with West Coast working in company at Santa Anita. This was on the 21st. It's going to be a 3/4 mile workout, and I believe he's in the back with the target. That's typically the way he breezes. He's a very solid-looking horse as he takes aim on his workmate. You can see he knows the drill here. They've given the workmate quite a head start, Joe, and that really is by design. If they had started on even terms, in all likelihood, West Coast would have outrun his workmate halfway through the work and have no company toward the finish line. So at this point, you can see West Coast rider having him pretty wide around the turn. That also by design to make sure he doesn't catch the workmate too soon. They want to time this perfectly so that he gets to him right around the wire rather than before where the horse might lose interest. And really the critical point of a workout is to have a horse running full throttle, all out, to and even past the finish line a jump or two. You'd hate to see a horse easing up in that final stride.
This was one of the best horses in training, and he probably still is, winning 5 races in a row as a 3-year-old. Then he lost to Gun Runner in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Then he lost to Gun Runner again in the Pegasus World Cup. Then he lost to Thunder Snow in the Dubai World Cup. Then we didn't see him, Caton, for several months. Bob Baffert said, maybe he was 75, 80% for the Awesome again, and he was able to run second to accelerate. You would think that he would take a pretty significant step forward.
I want to stress that these workouts that we're seeing, in particular from Santa Anita, happened a while ago. In many instances, the horses have already worked back since the work that we're seeing, or they may be scheduled to work again today. And this is not an invasion of the light snatchers.
This is alien landing happening here?
This is McKinsey out there for a work at Santa Anita. Again, thanks to XBTV for providing this video. McKinsey, another one of those kind of late to the party types that Bob is known for, that come up suddenly, join the party, and then snatch victory in the biggest races of them all.
I thought I saw where Bob made an announcement about his riders, too. I think Mike Smith is going to stick with McKinsey, and I believe Johnny V is going to be on West Coast.
That's correct. That was, I put it out. I thought he was leaning that way all along, but he confirmed it last night, I believe, or yesterday. But Johnny V on West Coast and Mike Smith on McKinsey. And there's a look at Axelrod, who faced McKinsey in the Pennsylvania Derby and ran a very good race. Axelrod's just hanging out, waiting for his time on the track. You can see Greg Blossy in the background, one of the stellar outriders. Those are the traffic cops. Those are the guys out there that the riders count on. If something does go amiss, if there's a loose horse, they're there to catch them. But they're also there to make sure that everybody's kind of minding their business and obeying the unwritten rules of the racetrack so far as how you should be riding your horses, where you should be riding them. You don't want to go slow on the inside fence where you might want to get in the way of a worker, or too fast on the outside fence where you get tangled up with horses pulling up. They do an amazing job. I think the outriders here at Churchill Downs are some of the best outriders in the country. And the horses just chilling. Axelrod among them, waiting to go out. We'll see some more very soon, but right there in the midst of them is Gabby.
Thank you, Caton. Well, as you can see, Axelrod and Vibrance are just hanging out at the Lucas Gap, waiting for the track to open so they can go out and put in their final work and prep for the Breeders' Cup. And I was speaking to Jose Ortiz, who is actually aboard Axelrod. So Jose will be working Axelrod, and Tyler Gaffleone is aboard Vibrance. And the plan is for both of these horses to actually work in company. They plan on going a half, and I think we can expect to see Vibrance on the inside, Axelrod on the outside. So just something to pay attention to. And we can hear from the loudspeakers on the back stretch, the track is now open. So these horses will be putting in their work in just a few moments.
Yeah, they're on the Gabby and Caton schedule, Tyler and Jose.
Yeah, they're getting in the car. They'll be on the road with us. Look out. I don't want to race them down I-64. But it is amazing the hours that the jocks are putting in as well. If you factor in travel time to different states in many instances, as well as flying in. I know Javier Castellano is going to be flying in, I believe, this weekend for some workers for the Breeders' Cup, but has been riding. I did hear that racing was canceled in New York. So the weather that the horsemen were concerned about and that caused so many of them to freeze their Breeders' Cup horses yesterday has apparently happened. So it'll be a quiet day in New York so far as any activity is concerned. But fortunately, the track here is in great shape and now open for training. And, you know, the difference between jockeys and exercise riders is significant in terms of the types of works you're often going to see, Joe. The horses know when the jockey gets on their back that there is a difference as far as the size is concerned, unless the exercise rider happens to be an ex-jockey or someone who is the same weight as jockeys. Most of the time they're a little bit heavier, and there is just a difference in terms of styles as well. So the horses sense that, and they kind of get their game faces on. It's more similar to race circumstances. And a trainer will often go to the jockey both to get that deeper workout, but also to allow the jock to get a feel for the horse too, and kind of instill some confidence in the jockey, establish that relationship, especially if they haven't ridden them before.
And in Javier Castellano's case, if you're riding Catholic Boy, you want to keep that mount. Not that Javier would ever lose it, a career winner of over 5,000 races. Congratulations to him on that recent milestone. But, yeah, there's a lot to be said with the familiarity, horse to rider and rider to horse. And we're seeing two of the best jockeys in the country, Vibrance with Tyler Gaffleone, Jose Ortiz on Axelrod, doing some yeoman's work here for Mike McCarthy.
Tyler is taking a one-race lead in the jockey standings on this closing day at Keeneland. We'll see if he can hold on and win the title outright, or if Julian Leperoux answers back with a victory to tie it up today. It really literally goes down not only to the last day, but could potentially go down to one of the last races on the program this afternoon. So has been a really exciting jockey race just down the road in Lexington at Keeneland. And in the meantime, Tyler getting on Vibrance. And also sometimes jocks who are here will help out trainers even if they're not riding the horses in the race. So that's important to note. I know Bob Baffert frequently uses particular jockeys in the morning for workouts. He won't necessarily have Mike Smith on every horse he's going to be riding in the afternoon. We frequently see Martin Garcia breezing horses for Bob Baffert, and then other jockeys riding them. So it doesn't always mean that they are their regular pilot, but oftentimes it is.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt. I mean, business-wise, particularly if a trainer has a big barn full of good horses, to do them a favor here and there.
You can see them standing up. We heard Tracy talking about Catholic Boy earlier today, that he likes to look at horses, and I think a lot of the good horses love the opportunity to catch their breath and to see everything, but this also enables the riders to pick a good time to start their workout or to turn their horses around. Ideally, you'd like to work when there's nobody else around you, nobody in front of you, nobody in back of you. You have the racetrack to yourself. Rarely do you have that opportunity, but if you sit and wait long enough, it's kind of like waiting at the intersection to cross the street. You find the best time that's the clearest of traffic.
You don't want to be playing Frogger if you can avoid it. Vibrance with a pony. She's a 2-year-old filly. Axelrod standing by himself. He's a 3-year-old colt. You could see Axelrod just kind of really taking everything in, enjoying the surroundings. There's not a lot going on right now. These are the two stars of the show at this point.
It'll be interesting to see if these two breeze in company or if they breeze separately, and if they do breeze in company, if they break off together or one is in front, one is in back. You'll see stablemates breeze together. The trainers looking for horses that complement each other so far as styles and personalities are concerned. A little unusual, but not completely out of the ordinary to see a 2-year-old breezing against an older horse, or even a filly against a colt, because typically they're not going to be running against each other, the fillies with their own division. And most of the time you'd give the edge to the older horse, and you'd also give the edge to the colt. So this, if they were to breeze together, it would be a little bit of a test for Vibrance, but you never know. She might be a particularly sharp workhorse, and Axelrod might be a little bit lazier. So again, you're looking to pair the personalities and the running styles of the horses to complement each other for the workout. They actually just went behind us.
Yeah, and Axelrod kind of has become a lot more professional. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Mike McCarthy obviously has a plan here, and important workouts for these two. Their final moves leading up to the respective races on Future Stars Friday for Vibrance and on Championship Saturday for Axelrod.
You can see Axelrod on the inside here is easing on up, and I think that they're going to start to pick up a little momentum as they approach the pole. Pony's just letting go of Vibrance and Tyler. And you see her head pop up a little bit. You can see she wants to go on with it. She'd like to just run on right on by her workmate. Now, Jose has a very long hold of Axelrod, but you can see he's taken a little hold of the bit, and Jose's feet go toward the front as he tries to rock back without moving his hands, because the signal to a horse to run is when a rider sneaks up and reaches their hands up on the reins. They actually take another cross of the reins. They reach up and grab them to signal to go. It's almost like stepping on the accelerator. So you don't move your hands and you don't move too much prior to the pole if you don't want them to take off.
Trying to keep them on even terms, it looks like here, Kate. Vibrant's a little bit more headstrong than Axelrod, who's a little bit more of a professional. Part of that probably the horse themselves, but also the fact that he's a lot more experienced.
Exactly. And there's a lot of horse underneath Jose at this point. He's just sitting patiently. Axelrod is in a nice, steady rhythm right now, very straight. Meanwhile, Vibrance, you can see scrambling just a little bit outside of him now. She wasn't quite sure around the turn, I felt like, where she was at, but this is one of her first, if not her first work over this track surface, so that's what it's all about, for her to get her feet underneath her, to get a feel for the track. Now she's come off the bridle at this point quite a bit. You can see Axelrod is going on with it, but the work is done and over. This was all the gallop out, and this is just in watching how the horses are finishing, and when they're completely done with their work, at what point they ease up. You can see that it seemed a little bit easier for Axelrod than it was for Vibrance, but that said, given that she is a 2-year-old filly working against a 3-year-old colt, I didn't think that was a bad work at all for her.
Yeah, very good point. And it looks like we've got the fractional times coming in from Kevin Kirstein, and they're in company, so they're probably going to get the same time, although visually Axelrod obviously a little bit better there. 12-1, 24-1, 36-1, 48-1, galloping out 5 furlongs and 101 and 2/5. So I'm guessing Mike McCarthy got out of this work for both of these individuals exactly what he wanted.
Now Promises Fulfilled and 7 Trumpets are out on the track right now. There's Promises Fulfilled, and I think they were not going to breeze today. I think they're just going to...
They were going to, and I think
they decided to wait until the next day. But yeah, going back to that workout, they did stay together really to the wire. I mean, the riders made sure that they were pretty close there. And I think that's probably exactly what Mike was looking for, at least to the wire. Just giving them a good feel for the racetrack. That's kind of the most important thing. And to... get something underneath them. It also opens their lungs a bit, so there's the cardiovascular element of it as well, as opposed to the maintenance and endurance, the stamina building that takes place with the galloping. Promises Fulfilled. He is a flashy horse. If he weren't such a great racehorse, he would be a great show horse. He just has that presence about him.
Again, it's the development of a horse, right? So this horse set the pace in the Kentucky Derby. Now we're seeing him several months later, Caden, as the favorite, one of the favorites for the Breeders' Cup Sprint. So everyone's chasing the Run for the Roses as their 3-year-olds develop. Everyone would like to run in the Kentucky Derby, but after the Derby, after the Triple Crown is over, some of these horses go to turf. Some of these horses cut back in distance. Promises Fulfilled is a perfect example of that. Maybe not a horse that wants to go 1 1/8 or 1 1/4 and be able to carry that speed that far. But when you shorten him up to 6 furlongs and he makes the lead and he has an element of stamina to go along with his natural speed, that's when he becomes a very dangerous and classy racehorse. And his stablemate 7 Trumpets very similarly has kind of found his niche as well.
So Promises Fulfilled, to be clear, though, cross-entered will most likely end up in the sprint, according to Dale, and 7 Trumpets. Even though he has the saddle towel, we are waiting to find out confirmation if this really is 7 Trumpets or not. Seems to be a little debate, but if that's the case, then he would be going out during Breeders' Cup time, I believe, with the Breeders' Cup saddle towel on. I think it's probably, you would think it would be him.
Unless Dale's trying to pull a fast one. Dale, I mean, if you're listening, give us a heads up. Yeah, you would think that the horse would be wearing the correct saddle towel. I mean, it's a Breeders' Cup saddle towel. Again, we don't have confirmation on that. These horses were going to work today, but again, rerouted to work tomorrow when the weather's supposed to be a little bit better. But just speaking of Promises, we're looking at maybe the potential of this being Dak Attack, who is pre-entered in the Breeders' Cup Sprint and on the outside looking in. So that is Promises Fulfilled. We're waiting for clarification of whether or not that is Dak Attack or Seven Trumpets, the other horse on the racetrack for the Romans barn at this point. And now we're hearing it is Seven Trumpets. Brandon Staubel just texted me. He said it's Seven Trumpets. He sees Seven Trumpets almost every day, so he would know. There he is.
You know, the saddle towel is important, not just for the clockers, but in general for the team of veterinarians that are on the backside. There are daily inspections of all the Breeders' Cup horses, right. And they also are keeping an eye on them as they train, just to make sure that nothing goes amiss. The welfare of the horse is, of course, the first priority for everyone involved, and so each of the horses is inspected daily, and not just by their team of people, but also by that team of veterinarians as well, with every effort taken to make sure that when those horses go in the starting gate, everything is going to be 100% for all. But so unusual how quickly things can change, or some little instance can happen. I think back to Lady Eli stepping off the racetrack after a workout, right, and stepping on something that pierced her hoof and led to a bout with laminitis that almost took her life. It definitely would have thought to have taken her career. She rallied, fortunately for her connections, and for all of us, not only to recover from it, but to regain her brilliant form on the racetrack. So, but it's just a lesson and a reminder of how quickly things can change or go amiss, and how critical the attention to detail is that all the trainers have and show back here. You know, going back to, you said promises fulfilled with the sprint, and we were looking at Seven Trumpets, who's going with the dirt mile, it looks like, though he's also got a choice of spots. And what a great position to be in for Dale Romans and for some of those other trainers who do have two equally talented horses that could wind up in either of the Breeders' Cup races.
This is a game of egos for sure, and they want their horses to accomplish as much as they can. Dale has come out and said it, you know, promises fulfilled might be good enough to go into the dirt mile and potentially be the controlling speed in a race like that. He could probably win that race, or he could win the sprint, but they're chasing the sprint championship. They want the Eclipse Award. They want the hardware at the end of the year, and that's kind of gone into the decision as to maybe point promises fulfilled in the direction of the sprint.
Let's check in again with Gabby. I think she's caught up with a member of our Players Show team.
That's right. A member of our Player Show team, Aaron Greider, who was actually out on the turf course yesterday working one of Wesley Ward's contenders for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint. I have to remember that. Aaron, how was the work for her? And I know it was kind of an audible there, Wesley Ward shipping these horses in from Keeneland.
It was a decent work. You know, she wasn't real flashy, and Wesley told me she's not a great workhorse. I think that she worked with Chelsea Cloisters, who broke off a length behind her. I thought she was very impressive. I thought she handled the going a lot better. It's a little bit soft out there right now. I don't think that Shang really prefers it being soft. She's only run those two races, but they were very impressive. And it says it wasn't a complete fast track when she won at Ascot, but he said that it had been sunny and it dried out. It was pretty firm. He said, I don't really think she loves the soft goings, and I think he was right.
Well, talk about that relationship with Wesley and that communication, kind of going back and forth. You've worked so many horses with him leading into big weekends like the Breeders' Cup before. Talk about that relationship a bit.
Well, Wesley and I have been friends for many years, actually, before I started riding, and he was an apprentice, and I just remember when he broke Ferdinand's maiden, who went on to win the Kentucky Derby for Charlie Whittingham. But Wesley and I rode for years in Chicago together, and I just remember when it was his last race coming up, and I knew, you know, I was losing a good friend as far as being a competitor out there, but we never lost our friendship, and he's gone on to do great things. So we've always had trust in each other, and he's allowed me to come and get on these horses. And last year he had me get on Lady Aurelia, and, you know, I just asked him, do you mind? I want to get on one on the turf and one on the dirt, and just see how the track's feeling. And he, after I got on Lady Aurelia, he said, do you mind doing this every day for me? So I got on her for like 5 days in a row. But it's a pleasure getting on good horses, you know, and it's when somebody trusts you with their best horses, it's fun. It's a fun time of year.
talking about getting on some of the best horses leading into the best weekend too. Empire Maker, Go Zapper, Medaglia d'Oro, you've been on them all in prep for some of their big races. How do you feel when you are given the important position of getting these horses ready for such a big stage?
I enjoy it. Good horses are always fun to get on. It's a pleasure for me to do. And, I'm trying to get on as many as I can this week just so I can get a feel for the horses and actually still get that rush from being on top horses. But, I think people know when you do something right, they can trust you to put you on it. When you work for Steve Asmussen, he wants to go in 13 the first eighth of a mile and then pick it up from there. And you've got to have your clock very sharp, because if you're a couple fifths of a second off, the work could go backwards. If you go a little too quick early and don't finish as strong, you're not getting out of the horse what they really want. So I think it's very important, and it's an honor that I get to get on so many good ones.
What is that feeling like? I mean, for our viewers who aren't familiar with ever having ridden a horse, let alone breeze a horse, what is that feeling like, having that clock in your head, making sure that this very important work is going well timed, and that nice slow release of quickness really to the finish?
Well, it's a great feeling when a horse will respond to you and listen to you, whatever you want with your hand. You try and be a little light with them, let them settle into their work early on. You always want them to finish a little bit better. Each trainer will, want their works done a little bit different. As if you're working for Bob Baffert, he's going to have you on the ear set, and he'll be telling you on his walkie-talkie, pick it up. And you're set to go 5/8 of a mile. He'll say, oh, just keep going out. He's going well. Where other trainers don't put the equipment on you, they'll just tell you go a half mile, go off easy, and I just want to see him really accelerate down the stretch and maybe a pretty good gallop out. So each horse is different, and each trainer is different. A horse like Go Zapper, as brilliant as he wasn't a real flashy workhorse. He would do what you wanted, but you didn't get off him and say, wow, it was so impressive. Where some of them that you get on, you come off and it's just, you just a smile from ear to ear, and you're just like, oh my gosh, this was
I did well.
Fun. Yeah, he did well.
We both did well.
Right. It's a lot of fun.
What could we expect in terms of you working horses in the lead up to the Breeders' Cup?
I know Wesley Ward said he's got a couple more coming out this week. I would assume tomorrow or Monday at the latest. So I'll be getting on those. Jeremiah Englehart's got a couple here. I know he's running in one of the undercard stakes. Dale Romans told me to stop by. He might have me work a couple of his Breeders' Cup horses. So I would imagine that I'll be on 3 to 5 more. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to those workouts. We're looking forward to you on potentially both surfaces and your insight on the Players Show next weekend as well.
I'm looking forward to working with you.
All right, Kaiten.
We are all looking forward to getting on the Players Show set and digging into the Breeders' Cup races themselves, but a lot taking place before we get to that point on Future Stars Friday and, of course, Championship Day Saturday. We will also be kind of sussing out things on Thursday, and race meet gets underway on Sunday. Joe, you've got a busy week ahead of you as well. Promises Fulfilled, meanwhile, is just chilling. He hung out there almost through the entire interview of Aaron's and has just started to do his little jog. And I suspect the connections are going to try to keep him pretty leisurely today so that they can wait for a breeze tomorrow on maybe a different, maybe a little bit drier racetrack.
Yeah, he was supposed to work today, and we talked about the routines and sometimes how horses know what they're supposed to do on a given day. And you would think that maybe he would be a little bit more headstrong, but he's very calm, cool, collected, composed, and he looks great, which I guess would be a pretty good sign. This horse trains with speed. He runs with speed. But like we said earlier, he was running in longer races earlier on this season, so he kind of combines that speed with a little bit of stamina as well, which is why he's had such a good campaign.
And this is a good shot to be able to see the racetrack and how the renovation has affected it in some places, and also how much moisture is there. You can see how quickly the track dries out, especially when there was no racing yesterday afternoon, so it remained sealed. Any rain that came down didn't really have a chance to permeate the surface. It gets harder to maintain when you're racing in the rain because the horse's hooves are going into the surface and the rain is permeating it, and that's when it becomes a bit heavier, a bit sloppier. But otherwise, you can have a really pretty tight, fast racetrack despite all the moisture. that's what trainers want to be hesitant about, depending on how their horses like that type of a surface, and also whether they are concerned about maybe doing too much. They might want to wait an extra day, not just to make sure it's dried out, but also to make sure that more horses have trained over it when it hasn't had rain, so that it becomes a more even racetrack that's been worked by the harrows versus being sealed consistently.
Yeah, Jamie Richardson and his crew do a great job here at Churchill, and this is just a wonderful surface. You talked about how well it dries, how quickly it dries. Obviously, in the colder temperatures and no sun, that process is going to take a little bit longer, but still remarkable how well and how quickly this main track dries out. Now, this time of the year, and the turf course dries well here as well, but this time of year on the grass, Kate, it's not growing. It's taking a lot of moisture. It's going to, over the course of time, with this kind of weather and the dampness, take a lot longer to dry out than it would during the summer months.
From the dirt to the turf, we are going to transition and focus in on some of the pre-entries for the Longines Turf. $4 million, a mile and a half. And among those that have already put in some workouts, Robert Bruce over at Belmont Park yesterday for Chad Brown turned in a workout of half a mile. This will be in, this one is a different one. We'll wait to see Robert Bruce. You saw Analyze It as well. He was tuning up for the mile. He worked as well in company with Instilled Regard. Robert Bruce is going to work in company with Almanar. And it's interesting to me, Joe, because now getting an opportunity, thanks to the New York Racing Association for the video, to see these horses over a period of workouts, how Chad changes up the workout partners. Because I don't believe Robert Bruce worked with Almanar the last time they worked together. So again, trying to achieve different things with different workouts at different stages. Also seeing how horses have responded to the works or their workmates. You might change things up, you might leave them together. If one is beating the other frequently, then you're probably going to change it up a little, because you don't want that other horse necessarily to get demoralized or feel like he's always going to be losing. We're going to skip ahead rather than Robert Bruce. We'll get back to him, but we are going to take a look at the mile. And the mile division features really some of the most exciting horses I can think of. So memorable Breeders' Cup moments for me on the turf have happened in the mile. Yeah,
Goldakova winning 3 in a row. Freddie had trying to come back here and win another Breeders' Cup mile. But there's been some huge upsets in the Breeders' Cup mile. The Breeders' Cup mile is a race that Chad Brown has not won yet. He won his first Breeders' Cup race in 2008 with Maram. He's won 9 Breeders' Cup races since 2012. 8 of those on turf, none of those on the mile. He's got some live shots this year, including Analyze It, the 3-year-old, who I think is going to get better with age, and we'll see how well he performs in this particular race, but this is a horse that should be forwardly placed.
So again, Analyze It is on the inside for this workout. Instilled Regard, a non-Breeders' Cup horse, is to the outside. Fortunately, Chad has so many horses that whether the Breeders' Cup, non-Breeders' Cup, they're all pretty good. And he has a lot to choose from as far as these workmates are concerned. This will be half a mile. It was at Belmont on the 26th, and the final time is going to be 49 and 55 100ths, or 49 and 2. In this case, again, on the turf, the dogs are up, so they're toward the outer part of the course. The emphasis not as much on time as it is on how they're doing it. And you Analyze It, seems to have the jump on his workmate, and it looks like he really would like to maintain that lead. His rider has a very firm hold on the reins and has really taken a nice hold to get him to settle back. And we'll see if they actually get head and head through the turn here. But very typical of a Chad Brown work set, in that the horses stay together and continue on together to the finish, letting them all out a notch as you get closer to the finish line. And nice acceleration here. Ears pinned for Analyze It. He doesn't like that his competition is looking him in the eye. And he keeps his nose in front, right to the wire. Again, a little bit of urging, not much. The horses continue on about their business. They stay in that open stride rather than letting up. And you can tell by the rider's position as well. If the trainer doesn't want to gallop out, you'll see the riders stand up full. If they stay down and low, then the trainer's probably looking for a little bit more of a gallop out.
Analyze it, probably most famous for his losses in the Pennine Ridge and the Belmont Derby to Catholic Boy. But at that point, we didn't realize how good Catholic Boy was, and that it was no disgrace to lose narrow decisions to him. Analyze just missed in the Secretariat as well. But I think the best is yet to come moving forward from his 3-year-old into his 4-year-old year.
Maker's Mark Filly and Mare Turf features 5 of Chad Brown's pre-entrants. A Raving Beauty, as well as Sister Charlie. Tias is in that group. We also today at Churchill had a few workers for this one. Furiously Kissed among them. And that's a look at her. Furiously Kissed out on the track, jogging for Luch Racing. Anthony Cordarolo. It's the daughter of Langfour, who was 4th in the Spinster in her most recent start. She has had just 3 previous tries on the turf and has not hit the board in any of them, but I do think she's a better horse now than she was a little earlier in her career. She seems to be a later maturing type and has steadily gotten better. She likes a distance of ground, to be sure. And Furiously Kissed is the type that might not win a lot, but boy, she tries hard every single time she runs.
Claim for $62,500 this past March at Gulfstream, and 3rd in the Apple Blossom. She was a winner of a conditioned allowance race at Thistle on the main track and did not disgrace herself at all behind Blue Prize in the Spinster. And like we talked about earlier, Luch is not afraid to take a shot.
It's Furiously Kissed out tuning up for the Breeders' Cup with a little light maintenance here at Churchill this morning. Also out this morning we had Paved, preparing a 3-year-old filly getting ready for the 1 3/8 Breeders' Cup filly and Mare Turf. Paved was 2nd in the Rodeo Drive at a 1 1/4 at Santa Anita behind Vasilika. She has a slate of 2 wins, 1 2nd and 3/3, and 8 tries on the grass. And was the winner of the Honeymoon back in June. I thought she was perhaps at her peak and underestimated her, to be fair, in the Rodeo Drive in her last start. I thought she actually ran a really nice race.
That was her first try against Elders. You see Vasilika, who is one of the better American female grass horses in training, as is Cambodia. She split those horses, and one could make an argument that Paved was the best horse that day. She had a rail trip. She finished very well. The winner, Vasilika, just got the jump on her that day, and Paved was trying to play catch-up, but that was probably the best race of her career. And again, a progressive 3-year-old filly. This is a tough spot, against the likes of an Able, et cetera, et cetera. Enable's in the male, the turf race. But against some of the top Europeans who have been competing all year against top-class horses overseas. Paved is going to be up against it a little bit, but again, this is a horse that you most likely will see in the Breeders' Cup filly and Mare Turf again next year.
Now we'll take a look at Chad's fillies that were in action breezing in New York, starting with 4-Star Crook, who will work inside of a Raving Beauty. Both of these fillies pre-entered. This workout happened on the 26th of October, 49-3. Again, 4-Star Crook is on the inside and a Raving Beauty, the gray filly, on the outside.
Interesting, because 4-Star Crook is kind of a deep closer, where a Raving Beauty likes to show better natural speed from the gate. That 4-Star Crook would be on the inside of a Raving Beauty. Interested to see how this workout plays out.
And on the outside, a Raving Beauty, you can see, is built a little bit more like a speedy type. She's a little shorter bodied, a little shorter coupled, and she looks like a Spitfire on the outside. Rider's kind of having to restrain her a little bit more than the rider on a Raving Beauty, on a 4-Star Crook. 4-Star Crook looks like she's on cruise control here, and they are really trying to keep a Raving Beauty off of her a little bit here, even around the turn. You can see the head cocked to the inside. I think the rider's trying to make sure that she doesn't lose any ground or even shy away, or even under restraint. Sometimes you kind of lose your momentum, so you lose your way and you drift out. So I think that inside rein was assigned to just try to keep her and guide her around the turn and stay close to her workmate. It's also really hard, Joe, when the cones are out that far. The horse's tendencies are to drift inside or to drift outside. So they're not quite sure what to do because there's no fence to keep them straight. It's an imaginary barrier that they don't really know exists. So the rider has to work extra hard to make sure that they stay kind of straight, but in the middle of the track outside of the cones.
A raving beauty, gate to wire in the First Lady at Keeneland. She got away with a slow pace up front. And 4-Star Crook, what a cool horse she is. I mean, she just missed behind her stablemate, Sister Charlie, in the Beverly D, and then came back and won a weak addition to the Flower Bowl, I thought, last time out, but she's one who brings her A game every time, a 12-time winner. And speaking of Sister Charlie and Tice, two more of the Chad Brown Brigade for the Philly Inver Turf.
And this one on the 26th of October at Belmont, New York Racing Association providing this video. You can see the weather was a little bit better at that time.
Yeah, right.
And a very lush turf course that they're working over here. Sister Charlie is going to be on the inside again, and Thias on the outside, and that's interesting as well. You can see maybe a pattern developing. The horses that have more speed are actually positioned to the outside. In Chad's cases, Thias is usually the rabbit or a horse who shows speed, but in her own right ran a big race in the Beverly
She
D.
did. We thought she was a rabbit that day. So did the betting public. She was 47-1, and mid-stretch, she was on the lead, and she ran a good third that day. Another progressive sort is Tice, a 4-year-old filly who, we may see in this race again next year.
Sister Charlie getting the jump on her workmate, takes the lead, and kind of perfectly balanced there. The exercise rider's positioned right over her withers. Has kind of got a long rein, which is nice to see how she stretches her neck out here as she stretches out, lengthens her stride a bit, and she starts to pull just slightly away from her workmate, switches her leads, and now her workmate starts to come to her, and you can see Thias kind of doing something that she doesn't typically do, which is sit behind other horses. But she's doing it really nicely and in a controlled way, and I love to see the fact that she didn't get discouraged. She kind of kept running all the way to get to her workmate, even though she wasn't getting to do what she likes to do in the manner in which she likes to do it. That's not an easy task, to take a horse that is typically the rabbit or where you're encouraging speed all the time in them, but then to get them to be controlled, to sit back, and to wait for the command to go. Usually those horses just do it naturally and instinctually on their own to go right to the front. So the fact that she did it and was so well behaved about it might show maybe a different dimension to her that she's capable of.
Interesting. Chad Brown obviously knows what he's doing, particularly with the turf horses, and some interesting pairings there in the workouts, and then, like we said, inside to outside and choosing which one was in which position.
A minute ago we saw King of Speed in the juvenile turf. We're going to take a look at him now. He's out there enjoying the crisp October weather.
Crisp October weather, yes.
Emphasis on crisp. King of Speed. It's a little bit of a bigger body type horse, big boned, if you will, but I kind of has a little personality coming through with his face, that white blaze. Looks like he could be pretty quick. That square shoulder is oftentimes the sign of a horse that has a little bit of early speed and tends to be strong out of the gate. Very strong, sturdy neck, too.
Interesting by Jimmy Creed. You would think this horse would be a sprinter. Started out sprinting at Santa Anita, 4.5 furlongs, 5 furlongs. Didn't go so well. Then stretched out on turf at Del Mar and seemed to get a little bit better and better and better. And won the last 2 races at Del Mar and Santa Anita, respectively. Minor stake races on grass. So you can look at pedigrees, Caton, and kind of guess what you think a horse should do, what a horse might do, what they were born to do, but it doesn't always work out that way.
No, that for sure. They say they make liars out of all of us horses. Well,
that's a cool blaze too. Looks like a bite has been taken out of it.
And he's really minding his manners, even though he's just out there by himself jogging. You can see that he is attentive. He's straight forward, not looking around to the right or the left, kind of just doing whatever he's supposed to be doing. He's another one that has the bell boots on, so I imagine he's just going to jog this morning.
Another horse getting acclimated to the surroundings here for Jeff Bondi as well. All of the work has been done in Southern California at a breeze at Santa Anita on October the 20th. And again, a progressive type who has really seemed to improve, taking his game to a new level since being stretched out around 2 turns on the grass.
And we saw earlier works for John Sadler's horses. It's just a couple random notes to keep in mind. We were seeing some of those workouts from New York and from California. We know there were no workers of significance on the East Coast given the weather conditions, but on the West Coast, John Sadler's horses were expected to work today and then would ship tomorrow to Kentucky. So we may get a look at them on Monday, breakfast at the Breeders' Cup. And we'll certainly have some information about those workouts and maybe even the video as well. That's something to look forward to. We also have those workers that were postponed and pushed back. Monomoy Girl, among several for Brad Cox, expected to work tomorrow. In fact, I believe it's going to be a very busy day during the Breeders' Cup breaks for workers. Here were our workers today. Just to recap, we saw Signalman tune up a half mile in 47 and change. We saw Reflect 5 furlongs, 5/8 of a mile in a minute flat. Derby Date went half a mile in 48 and 21/100ths. Axelrod half a mile in the same time. And Vibrance, who worked in company with Axelrod for Michael McCarthy, turning in the same time for half a mile. I thought that's a pretty significant move for her, given the accomplishments of Axelrod. Kind of a nice team to see in a different twist, which is what we are going to get to look forward to tomorrow. A lot of different twists and a lot of information, a lot of action and excitement. But it's been fun. We're going to do it again.
Yeah, I've liked Axelrod, coming into this, and he hasn't done anything to limit my expectations or my excitement about him being a potential live long shot in the Classic. And we're going to see a lot more horses doing a lot more work the next couple days.
I'm also going to be getting those restaurant tips out to everybody, and Gabby and I hitting the road. I know you've got a lot of work to do to get ready for opening day at Churchill Downs, closing day at Keeneland today, but we will be back bright and early tomorrow. I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. Look forward to joining you again tomorrow for breakfast at the Breeders' Cup.